Hi guys, good evening. Thank you for joining the live stream. I hope the audio is coming fine. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. It's called evening when you work graveyard shift. Yeah, good night sounds like a goodbye, so I say good evening. Okay, let me see. Some questions came. AB is saying Ram Ram sir, Ram Ram, long question. Part A. Let's say we are right wing. Why in our side there are so many fragmentation? While on left, they all are unison. You take any topic, Keju, Pappu, appeasement. You talk to See, one thing is it is bit of a human. It's a natural human characteristic that when you are a minority in a situation, you will be more united. That is just the nature of it. Like Bengalis who would here not be that much of friends with each other from different neighborhoods, from different food choices or family backgrounds, okay, different football clubs. They when they are in Kolkata, I mean, when they are in USA, they are united as fuck. Okay, they are unite just on the basis of being Bengali because they are not the majority there. They don't feel as threatened when in India, which is why they don't feel the need to be united. Okay, same with even the NRI community, more or less. And today, only reason you are seeing Congresses and commies in the same team discussing the same topics and even giving basically common talking points. Okay, arguing the same things in the same ways. That's only because BJP is in power. Let Congress or CPIM come to power, you'll see this unity gone like this in one moment. Okay, I couldn't even click. Okay, so like I have a relative, an NRI, who is from a CPIM family, lifelong communist empathizer, but he is a software engineer, so lives in USA. Now he is reading books on Gandhi. He's very intrigued by this phenomenon of Gandhi and his teachings. He's wondering, I wonder what really was there in his thoughts. So, only reason he now cares about Gandhi is because he thinks, well, whatever weapon we can use in the arsenal to fight BJP, we must use them. And which is why, even though the right, so-called, or the non-left is not really united, as you say, but even then, after all, they are still voting for one single party. That is the unity, some kind of unity at least. We can, of course, get to more unity, but complete unity, like there is even in the leftists, is not really good in the end, because it's a stupid society. Because how can you really agree with so many people on everything? How? How is that possible? You don't think anything on by yourself, okay? You don't have your own views. By now, some people do this stupidity of disagreeing and being non-conformist with people just to get that tag of being a fresh thinker, original thinker. No, I'm saying think hard. You will end up probably not agreeing with anyone 100%. But that usually doesn't happen inside Abrahamic groups like even communism and leftist politics. Someone became a member, X Chakraborty. Hi, thank you. Okay, let's start our discussion today. I like your intro music. What song it is? Is it some kind of stuti? You mean the music to my videos, not my live stream, right? That is my own arrangement. It's from the Devi Mahatmya, I think. Yeah. Gandhi is marketed very well by Congress worldwide. Yeah, but they were not finding any takers in commies up until now, unless they were a Marxist academic. Now even normal Marxists who would otherwise read probably something commie are reading Gandhi. Some progressive Marxists write so strongly against idol worship, but they themselves have made Gandhi a demigod. No, only now. Otherwise, they hate Gandhi as much as anyone else. There is this heterodox superiority complex. Yeah, I am different. Make a video about communist ideological subversion. I think many people have made video on this, no? Okay, let's start now. Today we listen to a speech given by Professor and economist David D. Friedman. He gave this speech in the Oxford University. Oxford University, for whatever, even though they did to Rashmi Sawant, still has some ounce of the principle of free speech left in them, which is why they still host people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, who are absolutely hated, cancelled figures in left-wing academia all around the world. But Cambridge and Oxford still maintain it to some degree. So David D. Friedman is the son of famous economist Milton Friedman. we'll listen to his ideas on basically what can be called radical capitalism. Why is Gandhi liked by the Westerners so much? It's not like Westerners love him. It's only the hippie white liberals who like him. Har Har Mahadev. Bolo. Slow motion में. Where is the video? Okay. Now you could ask that why is Gandhi so popular among white liberals? That is because of the white liberal obsession with Hinduism, which is their weird kind of Hinduism that they have understood, which is that it's all about peace, meditation, vegetarian diet, not harming anyone, not harming animals. It's a concoction of those things. So, but they don't understand that Hinduism is not a theory-based identity. It is an experiential identity. If your experience is that you are getting harmed day in and day out by one community, that community will also fight back. But they want Hinduism to be like Abrahamic faiths, which is a theoretical identity, a theory-based identity, i.e., your faith was born in Saudi Arabia. Now, wherever you go, you will try to emulate that lifestyle you had in Saudi Arabia, because the empirical evidence around you does not matter one bit. ये एक book लिखा गया है, उसको follow करना ही है. That is the idea of identity-based unit, theory-based identity, okay? Whereas we don't have any one single Bible or any one book that we must follow wherever we go, right? Hence, we are an experiential identity. Whatever your experience around you, whatever the empirical evidence around you, you mold your views according to that. But of course, you have to be trained in philosophy, not academically, anyhow at all. You have to think philosophically at least, so that you don't disregard anything just because it was written more than 100 years back. So it doesn't mean that discard Arthashastra, because in a democratic setting, each and everything said by Chanakya is not going to be applicable. Even in a global setting that you are in, you can't really cut people's fingers off and noses off for different punishments. But what is the philosophy in that book? Okay, Sukhasya Mulam Dharma, Dharmasya Mulam Artha. What a brilliant, what a genius thing to come up with. Okay, so why not try to follow that? But not word for word. The word for word following is when you get into weird territory where atheists get the better arguments that you are basically a stupid religious person. The West apes Gandhi because Martin Luther King mentioned that he was inspired by Gandhi. Yes. Dada, we have a lot of folks who spread bad ideas in India. We should counter them as well. Yeah. Om Namo Parvati Pataye Har Har Mahadev. Let's start.
My subject today is market failure, and I'm going to argue that market failure...
Okay, how many of you have absolutely no idea about economy or the study of economics? Raise your hands. So, market failure is the term used when let's say like 2008 financial crisis, okay? Basically, the entire economic system failed, mainly at the hands of and because of private companies. At least on the superficial level, on face value, it seems so. Those things are market failure, and in any economics class you will be taught about market failure. When might capitalism screw you? Repeatedly. Whereas you'll never be taught about government failure, which is any commie state in the history of communism.
Is both an argument for government intervention in the economy and an argument against government.
Yeah, his topic is that why this idea of market failure is, he's going to prove how this is actually an argument in favor of government intervention in private business, and it's also an argument again for that and against that. It works both ways.
Intervention in the economy, because it is both a reason why the free market sometimes does the wrong thing and a reason why the alternative mechanisms for making decisions often do the wrong thing. And I want to start out by explaining what I believe market failure is. That it is commonly why it is an argument against laissez-faire and why it is a stronger argument against the alternative. I'm going to argue that market failure is the exception on the private market and the norm on the political market. I also want to talk about its...
This is actually a very significant line. Listen to this line once again.
The alternative. I'm going to argue that market failure is the exception on the private market and the norm on the political market. I also want to talk about its relevance to lots of things that have...
It is the norm in the political market.
To argue that market failure is the exception on the private market and the norm on the political market.
It is an exception
I
in the
also
private
want to talk
market.
about its relevance.
I think it needs to be remembered. It needs to be drilled into some people's heads that it is an exception in the private market. It only happens sometimes. But in the political market, it happens all the time.
Relevance to lots of things that have nothing to do with politics, but have something to do with your lives. All right? And I'm going to be trying to explain. Let me start by pointing out that in many fields there are technical terms that sound self-explanatory and are not. And my standard example is the theory of relativity. I believe there are many people in the world who think they understand the theory of relativity, except for the mathematical details. That the theory of relativity says everything is relative, and I understand that. And in fact, of course, the theory of relativity does not say everything is relative. Among other things, as any physicists in the audience know, it says that the speed of light is quite impossibly absolute. Similarly, in the case of market failure, it sounds as though it means any situation where markets fail. And I'm going to argue that that's wrong twice over, that there are ways markets could fail that are not market failure, and that market failure happens in a whole lot of contexts that have nothing to do with what we normally call markets. So let me start by telling you what I believe markets...
Yeah, this is one thing usually libertarians for some reason get wrong. Some libertarians get wrong. That when a government is trying to basically, let's say, rectify a problem in the market or rectify a problem even in the government, okay, they say, okay, no, why is that government doing that particular thing? It's a government intervention. No, in fact, it's trying to rectify some problem which was created by some past government to, in fact, let the market do its thing. Abhay Agarwal is saying, I will be a devil's advocate in this, then we will treat you like the devil. But there has to be a better way to treat that exception. You see, the thing with Abhay exceptions is that if you go for a guarantee of complete, let's say, perfection, then with that fake promise of perfection comes utopian thinking, and that's communism. So it just has to be taken into account that, yeah, sometimes bad things will happen, whether they happen all the times or most of the time or very less amounts of time, and or sometimes. That is the thing we need to note. Like the 2008 financial crisis was not 100% the fault of the market. The Bill Clinton government, since Bill Clinton became the president, was basically pushing, nudging, asking the private markets, the banks, to give out loans to poor people who had absolutely no way to pay those loans back. So they were just listening to the president, Mr. President. So, of course, the government was not completely blameless even in that situation.
Market failure is, what I think is the most useful way of thinking of the concept. And that is that market failure describes a situation where individual rationality does not produce group rationality, where each individual correctly acts in his own interest, and all of us are worse off as a result. And that happens because I am taking an act that helps me but hurts you. You are taking an act that helps you but hurts me. It is not limited to markets. And let me start with my very favorite example. When I give this example in America, I have to require that people imagine they're several thousand miles away, but that's not necessary here. I just want you to...
Some of you all, if you have OCD, might be wondering, what the fuck am I doing looking here and there and being fidgety? I am trying to kill mosquitoes. I'm surrounded by the mosquitoes and I'm trying to do a massacre and genocide of mosquitoes. Guess why? I have a pond right beside my house, almost very near to my house. Now, it used to be some that smoke that kills mosquitoes, or at least kill mosquitoes' eggs. That used to be pumped in regularly, about, let's say, at least twice a year in that pond near my house. Up until Partha Chatterjee's house got found to be filled with cash. Since then, since every Trinamool local politician has been up in arms and have been very afraid that their money is going to run out soon, my local councillor stopped applying that mosquito killing smoke machine thing on my local pond, and since then mosquitoes have increased in my home. If instead of that, imagine we had the neighborhood had some sort of subscription to a mosquito killing agency. Imagine that, how evil capitalism that would be.
To shift back about 1,000 years, and imagine that you are part of a line of about 10,000 men with spears, And the spears are pointing that direction.
Meera Tripathi, your question is actually very important here. Sorry for pausing repeatedly. On what basis were they giving loans just like money distribution? Yes, that when they were asked to give out those loans, after that they did their capitalism based greed things. Okay, they made in fact even more money on that on those bullshit loans. Why did they give out those loans in the first place? Because if they are a shrewd businessmen, why would they give loans to a person who's not going to pay them back anyway? Guess why? It was Bill Clinton, the government, who said give out these loans so we can show the media and the world that how great our government is, because so many poor people are doing better in their lives because of this government. So there's almost a quid pro quo here. Government says to the private markets, give them loans so we can show their betterment. The banks know they are not going to be able to make that money back. But what's the other thing they know? They know that when we do screw up, the government is going to bail us out. So Democrat government, Bill Clinton, gives those loans or asks the governments banks to give those loans. Obama comes to power, bails out those banks. In the end, in the middle, who got screwed? The common people, who thought Bill Clinton is a great man for making this situation, or our lives were improved drastically under Bill Clinton. And then we went to war. And then, of course, again, the great messiah, Barack Obama, comes to power and bails out these banks. Who thinks now Barack Obama is doing a great job? Not those poor people, of course. They are very pissed with the banks now. But the countless people who work in those banks, who got bonuses, even though they screwed almost the entire world's economy, they gave themselves bonuses out of the bail package that Barack Obama gave them. And where did Barack Obama get that money? From the people, from their taxes. What a great collusion of conspiracy, and corruption.
And the reason they're pointing that direction is that there are another 10,000 men with spears coming at you on horseback.
Listen to this analogy, this example here.
Necessary here. I just want you to shift back about 1,000 years. And imagine that you are part of a line of about 10,000 men with spears, and the spears are pointing that direction. And the reason they're pointing that direction is that there are another 10,000 men with spears coming at you on horseback. If you like, you can assume that that you're Harold Godwinson's people and that those are the Bastard's people. And you do a very quick cost-benefit calculation. And you say, if all of us stand and keep our spears planted, with luck we can break their charge. And if we break their charge, some of us will die, but most of us will live. If we run, horses run faster than we do. I should stand. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I said we. I don't control him and him. I only control me. If everybody else stands and I run, one person out of 10,000 will have almost no effect on our chance of breaking the charge, and I won't be one of the ones killed doing it. If everybody else runs and I stand, I'm dead. Whatever everyone else is doing, I am better off running. Everybody makes this calculation. We all run, and most of us die. Welcome to the dark side of rationality. All right, that's one example. Let me now give you a much more mundane example, and one which I have experienced and probably you have. I experienced it when I was teaching at UCLA, and just south of UCLA, there is a traffic intersection that the locals claimed at the time was the busiest intersection in the world. It's about 8 or 10 lanes each way. So you have an intersection here, and as the light this way goes red, the last few cars try to get across and end up trapped in the intersection, blocking the cars coming this way. And gradually, the cars here manage to filter out just in time for the cars coming this way to fill the intersection as this light goes red and block it the other way. All right? If everybody politely waited to pull into the intersection until he was sure he could get across it, everybody would get home faster. But any person who did that would get home later because all of the costs I imposed by shoving across are costs imposed on these people.
These are sort of the prices that any pioneer in any field pays. Savarkar, Sitaram Goel, these people who passed away without almost any recognition, they paved the way. They showed so many people how to do it.
all of the costs they impose are costs imposed on these people. Hence, each of us is correctly making the decision in his own interest, and we're all worse off as a result. All right? That's my second example. Let me give you a third example, which I am even more confident you have experienced. You are in a restaurant or a pub having a pleasant conversation with your friends. And the only trouble is there are a bunch of other people in this restaurant or pub who are also having conversations. That makes it a little bit hard for you to hear what your friends say and for them to say it. And the only solution to that, obviously, is for you to speak a little bit more loudly. But of course, everybody else observes that they're having the same problem, so they're all speaking more loudly. So the only way you can possibly be heard is if you speak still more loudly. And so you end up with everybody speaking at the top of his voice. Most of you get...
Thomas Sowell calls this the fallacy of composition. I think we have discussed this previously in our live streams, that one person gets up in a stadium where everyone is sitting, watches the game better. If everyone gets up, no one watches the game better. That is the problem with trying to give reservations to everyone, or thinking that everyone deserves those same sorts of privileges. Then there won't be any benefit that you spot out of them, out of that group.
Getting hoarse and still having a hard time understanding each other. And as you can see, all three of these stories have the same basic logic. They are all cases where the individual rational behavior does not lead to the group rational behavior. Why is this politically interesting? It's politically interesting because there is a simple argument for freedom, for a laissez-faire system where everybody controls his own life, which unfortunately is wrong.
Atomized group identities also have this same problem, that reading all the betrayals that the Marathas faced with other Hindu kings. Repeatedly, Maratha kings are going on writing letters to other Hindu kings saying that, no, side with us, don't side with the Muslim kings. And repeatedly, one after the other, some time or the other, some other community, Hindu community, is saying, screw that. I find more benefit if I collaborate with the Muslims. Later on, they change their minds. Later on, they themselves get screwed. Even today, I was reading whose uncle, some uncle, Raghunath Rao, I think, betrayed his own nephew, and that nephew died when he was like hardly in his 20s. And that uncle goes on collaborating, Maratha king uncle goes on collaborating with the Muslims. But what's beneficial for Raghunath Rao or his small kingdom is not in fact beneficial for the entire group.
Unfortunately, because I like the conclusion. And the simple argument for freedom is that each person acts in his own interest. Each makes...
Meera Tripathi, what if Hindu kings never tried to understand Islam and their enemies? Because anytime someone tried to read and analyze Islam properly, someone told them that, what's the point of reading those things? These are written by mlechas. Don't read them. Our culture is the best and we have the best books. So we will survive no matter what.
Makes the decision that maximizes hit net freedom for a laissez-faire system where everybody controls.
Laissez-faire system, of course, most of you all know. It means basically an ideal libertarian free market society where the government doesn't really do much because everything almost takes care of everything else. Except maybe the government needs to still take care of life, liberty, and property.
Behavior. Why is this politically interesting? It's politically interesting because there is a simple argument for freedom, for a laissez-faire system where everybody controls his own life, which unfortunately is wrong. Unfortunately, because I like the conclusion. And the simple argument for freedom is that each person acts in his own interest. Each makes the decision that maximizes his net benefit minus cost. That maximizes net benefit for everyone, so there is no need for governments to intervene to change what people do. All right, sounds like a sort of a plausible kind of argument, but as we've just seen, what is wrong with it is the situation described by market failure. That sometimes I get the benefit of my act and you get the cost, air pollution, dangerous driving, filling up the intersection. And if so, I might take the action even if total cost, including your cost, is larger than benefit, which makes us on net worse off. And economists call these situations negative externalities. Sometimes I pay the cost and you get the benefit. I make a radio broadcast. I can't control who hears it, so therefore I can't charge for it. Similarly, I do some basic research, I make an important discovery, that information is available to many other people who benefit by it. So
Basically, what we are doing with this live stream.
in those cases, even if the benefit produced is larger than the cost, it might not pay me to do it. And that misses an opportunity to make us on net better off. This is what economists generally describe as the public good problem. Sometimes there are solutions to these problems, solutions that are dealt with by human ingenuity. So for example, you can have cases where you solve the externality problem by putting both parties in effect together. So consider, for example, a free parking lot. A free parking lot provides benefits for all of the merchants near it because it means their customers can come more easily. Free parking lot has some advantages over a pay parking lot because you don't have to watch and hire people to monitor cars coming in and out. How do you get a free parking lot? Well, somebody builds a shopping center. The firm that builds the shopping center owns the whole thing. They provide a free parking lot, and they charge for it implicitly in the rent that they charge to the stores that are occupying the shopping center. And they can make other calculations based on externalities as well. The people who own the shopping center can say, look, the movie theater would do better if there were a late-night restaurant next to it, so after the movie, people can go to a restaurant. The late-night restaurant would do better if there was a movie theater next to it, so we will arrange to rent one space to a late-night restaurant, one to a movie theater next to each other. And you can think of a whole lot of other ways.
All the ancillary businesses that prop up other, that's not exactly called ancillary, but anyway, related similar businesses that prop up usually beside a big business hub, which was going to happen with Shingur. Gautam Varun is saying, did he write any main books? Do you mean David Friedman? Yeah, David Friedman's book is what I bought a few weeks back. It's called Guide to The Machinery of Freedom, Guide to a Radical Capitalism. Abhay is saying, but my interests can clash against others' interests. Yeah, we'll get to that.
In which the proprietor of a shopping center can take account of these interactions, of the ways in which what one person in the shopping center does with regard to another, and thus get the optimal result with avoiding a market failure problem. All right? Some public good problems can be dealt with by ingenuity. And my favorite example of that is radio broadcasts. That it's perfectly obvious that you would never get private radio broadcasts because the broadcaster bears the cost of putting on the program, and he can't charge the people who listen to the program because he doesn't know who they are. He can't control who does it. But some unknown genius.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that today Spotify is basically a private radio broadcaster because there are podcasts and there are songs? Isn't it basically radio?
Thought of the idea of producing not one public good but two. One public good has a positive cost of production and a positive value to the consumer, and we call that a radio program. And one public good has a negative cost of production and a negative value to the consumer, and we call that an advertisement. And it has a negative cost of production because a firm will pay the radio station to put on the ad. You tie the two products tightly together and you give away the bundle. And that, in fact, is the way private radio and television are produced. And it's also, in effect, the way a good deal of the internet, of the World Wide Web, is produced as well. So that's one case in which you do it by ingenuity. But there's no guarantee you can do that. That is to say, there is no guarantee that anything worth producing will get produced because there isn't always some trick by which you can solve the problem. And it therefore follows that a government could step in to improve the situation by regulating air pollution and dangerous driving, making us all better off by preventing acts whose costs are larger than their benefits, and improve it by subsidizing radio, television, and basic research, making us all better off by producing acts whose benefits are larger than their cost. But there is a problem here. And the problem is that for this to work, we need to have some way of getting the government to, in fact, do the right things. So we want to think about the government, about the whole set of political actors, from voters all the way to the up or down to the prime minister, as themselves rational actors acting in their own interest, just like people in the private market. And then the question becomes, will the rational choices of those actors add up to rational choices for the whole polity. So we have exactly the same question with regard to the political market that we had with regard to the private market. And if they don't, if it is often in the interest of political actors to take actions whose costs are larger than their benefits, refrain from actions whose benefits are larger than their costs, then the government intervention could make things worse instead of better. And that brings us to the...
Okay. Avinav is saying that this is the reason why a state cannot only survive or industrialize based on just MSMEs without the presence of any large companies, because ancillary economy is a huge economy that is often overlooked. Yeah. How he can... AA, you are saying that Modi dumped Sadhvi Pragya, Rishabh Biduri and Nupur. Why do you think he dumped? What do you think he gains out of it? Give me your best possible argument as if you are Narendra Modi, okay? Tell me, why would you not stand with Nupur? Because obviously you might agree that he knows everything about Islam as much as you know, as you are showing in the comment section, right? Knowing those things, why isn't he siding with Nupur? What do you think his argument is? Okay, is that a Tamil word, Tamil name, something S? He's saying Hindu kings are idiots, they don't know how to fight with enemies and full time to drink alcohol stuff and make more children for fun, and unwanted philosophy and ethics come from ganja ideas. No, that's not it. That's not the reason.
The subject of market failure on the political market. Because in fact, if you think about it, most political decisions are made by people who neither pay the cost nor receive the benefit. The voter who makes himself well informed in order to know who to vote for provides benefits mostly to other members of his polity. The legislator who passes a bill is producing both costs and benefits for other people. The lobbyist who gets a bill passed is producing benefits for his customers and will sensibly ignore any costs imposed on people who are not his customers. And the judges who make decisions, who in the Anglo-American system make a good deal of the law by setting precedents, are setting precedents whose costs and benefits are almost entirely borne by other people. It follows that there is no reason to expect political actors to take the actions that maximize net benefit for all. For example, let me go through the ones I just listed in a little more detail, and I want to start with you. I presume that most of you, at least those of you who are British citizens, are voters, and as voters, I expect that most of you are rationally ignorant. It is rational to be ignorant when information costs more than it is worth. Most of us, ignorant sounds like a negative term, but of course most of us are ignorant about most things. I expect most of you, like a student I was talking about earlier, have not read Jesse Byock's wonderful article about Egel-Saga, and there are probably some of you who can't prove the Pythagorean theorem, quite a lot of you who don't understand how Ricardo invented general equilibrium theory without mathematics, and there are a whole lot of things I'm ignorant about too. So it's not irrational to be ignorant if the information is worth less than it costs. Think about what I like to refer to as the civics class model of democracy, or the naive model of democracy. And in that model, the reason democracy works is that if the politicians do...
He doesn't want to look anti-Islam. Okay, fair enough. Go further. Why do you think he doesn't want to look anti-Islam? What is his argument there? He doesn't... Okay, next answer is he doesn't want to upset the Gulf countries. Why would he accept civilian awards from these countries? What has Modi done for them? Okay, tell me, why does he not want to upset the Gulf countries? What does he get out of that? Do you indirectly benefit out of that? Let me know. Avinav is saying, what is this obsession of BJP with Pasmanda votes? Do they have any data to back that claim? What makes them think that Pasmanda will vote for BJP? It's a long-term play. The opposition never takes any action against hate speeches. And that project has to start sometime. It can't be forever a united election monolith and therefore have the say over resources, street violence, everything. Avinav Singh sees them as half Hindus who need to be brought into the fold. Yeah. Okay. Meera Tripathi, why would it be political correctness? If he was not in fact politically correct, what would happen to him? What do you think? Okay. There was some other comment. Yeah. Abhay is saying, don't you think this trans mistreatment is the result of intense greed which comes from capitalist principles? What do you mean by trans mistreatment?
Do the wrong things, we vote them out. All right, that's the sort of simple theory. But information is costly. If my vote has any effect at all, most of the benefit go to other people. So most voters are rationally ignorant. I cannot speak to politics.
Okay, something else. Please tell me your name first so I can say it. But something else. Let me tell you the one good quote from Winston Churchill that I've heard. That's probably the only sensible thing he has said. When the World War II was going on, one of his general came and said, "Sir, we are running out of funds, and why don't you close down your art and literature, education, culture studies departments and fund the war even more?" He said, "Then what are we fighting for?" Okay, so after the war is won, what kind of a society do you have? Do you have a stupid society when no one is able to think and only survives? Survival is going on in Pakistan even. Survival has forever gone on in Saudi Arabia. Survival never stops. How you survive, that is predicated on that land's philosophy, religion, culture, Vedanta, etc. So it's very important that you win wars, survive. But why you are surviving, that also needs to be very clear in your mind. You are not surviving just so you can breathe and drink water and poop. You are surviving so that you can go on reading Vedanta.
In the UK, but as far as I know, no American politician has ever run for office with the slogan, "I'm the bad guy."
Okay, CSK. Further, not CSK, I mean AA. There is some trade-off there. Why is he bending off over backwards? I also don't like the Hindu temple being constructed. Yeah, exactly. Why? Do you think Hindu gods don't visit those places? Are those places out of their bounds? Do you honestly think no one outside of India has ever had the blessings of Lord Shiva, Ma Durga? Do you honestly think Hans Zimmer can make the kind of music he can without the blessings of gods?
No American politician, as far as I know, has ever introduced a bill into Congress.
Saudi's rich, non-thinking population, you would be fine with them, yes. But what if your society is Saudi society? I'm saying obviously in the context of the other person's, Praveen S.'s comment, of course. Abhijit Armitra said that BJP tries to cut middlemen mullahs who exploit low-caste Muslim by giving them direct benefits, which requires quite amount of state support. Here we are being even more skeptical and cynical here. We are saying, we are getting into what is the personal motivation of Narendra Modi here. If let's say Narendra Modi does not care about lower caste Muslims having a better life, then what is Narendra Modi's personal gain here? It depends on if Hans Zimmer is an atheist or theist. No, it does not depend on that. I think he's an atheist. I don't think he's ever been to a church anytime soon.
Congress, whose title is A Bill to Make Farmers Richer and City Folks Poorer. Now, in fact, we have such a bill every year. It's called the Farm Program. Its basic purpose, through a variety of different mechanisms, is to raise the price of farm products in order to make farmers richer and the rest of us poorer. But a sensible politician will always find some argument to pretend that he's helping everybody.
Now we are getting to Indian commie thinking. Raise the prices of farmers' products. Just do that. Everything will happen. What is low-caste Muslim? Lower-caste Muslims are Pasmandas, Arzals, Ajlafs, whose parents were not Muslims, or whose parents or ancestors did not really come from outside India.
Different mechanisms is to raise the price of farm products in order to make farmers richer and the rest of us poorer. But a sensible politician will always find some argument to pretend that
Avinav, good question. I like point blank questions. Do you think MBS is an ex-Muslim? I don't think he is, because if you talk to any English-speaking commie who are going around saying that there is no difference between any religions, there is Islam is great, Islam is a religion of peace, Islam is a religion of nice things. There is the Makkah Muslim and Medina Muslim issue, as said by Ayan Hirsi Ali. There are some Muslims who in fact have made this new Islam for themselves. Okay, have I told this story before? There was an interesting story that happened during the Afghan invasions of USA. So the local tribes, they quickly realized that the US Army is basically going around looking for anyone who remotely comes across as a terrorist. So any small time goat herd owner who has any kind of competition or has some problem with another local goat herder goes to the US base, army base, and tells them, sir, I have heard that that person is a terrorist, or I have seen some strange things, people with guns going out and coming out, going into and coming out of his house. So the US Army immediately goes there and basically shoots up the entire place. That goat herder is dead, who had never had any connection with terrorism. Now, that man who died, his son now decides to become a Muslim Islamic terrorist. He goes to his local mosque, and that mosque apparently, the Maulana in that mosque tells him, no, why are you thinking that way? Everyone makes mistakes. Even the US Army people made a mistake. Forgive them. That is what Allah teaches you. So forgiving is one of the core basis of the Quran. That is what that Maulana tells him. And that guy, that young boy, decides not to become a Muslim terrorist. So there are different renditions of Islam. Like the English 2-volume Quran I have, it's written by Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani from Deobandi. Okay, from Deoband, who was responsible for India's partition. They have written this Quran where you won't find one single objectionable thing as a non-Muslim. Then there's this Ramakrishna Mission, which of course no Muslim ever reads, only Hindus read this. So I think MBS is following that kind of Islam. What other thing I wanted to respond? Yeah, the UAE will use it as a leverage, or other Muslims will use it as a comparison when we try to take our example back. Comparison for what? For now, it gives Hindus a better life there, because Hindus will have to go live in UAE, because even today most Indians are going on with their socialist things, right? And if they want to see true prosperity and want to get a true value for their skill sets, they will have to go to UAE. India is still not the place for that.
That he's helping everybody. I assume that politicians in England probably say, well, look, what would have happened to England in 1939 if it hadn't been growing enough food? Therefore, we've got to protect English agriculture to make sure that we can produce enough food so that the next time an enemy shows up in a position to put U-boats around our coasts and prevent our transport, we will be able to eat. And American politicians would have a little harder time making that argument, given that we're a large-scale exporter of farm products, but I'm sure they can find some way of doing it. So that means that in order to find out, in order for this naive model to work, the individual voter has to invest a substantial amount of time and energy figuring out what his politician has been doing and what he should be doing. Not trivial, all right? Even suppose you do enough to know that the person you're going to vote for or against voted against a bill you're in favor of.
Okay, a nice discussion going on here from David Friedman. Okay, Abhay is asking a very important question. Is mistreatment of genital mutilation of kid due to gender dysmorphia? Does it have to do with greed and capitalism? Yes, 100%. The medicine industry, the pharma industry, the mental health mafia has an incentive to sell you those products, to sell you more medicines, to sell you more injections, to sell you more surgeries. So how are they being able to do it? They have tie-ups with seemingly non-private government institutions and agencies, American Psychological Association, American Sociological Association. So whose fault it is? The rich man wanting to make more money, or the other people in those government agencies, the parents, them not doing their job? Uday Bhaskar is saying this is so difficult to understand for scientists or ideologues that there are always people who work hard to understand the issue and those who want to look cool by parroting, by shallow learning. But there are plenty of verses in Quran which are against infidels. That means the Quran you have... Yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about, Meera Tripathi. Sanitized Qurans are very popular. And I think MBS has been taught that probably, or has chosen to follow that Quran. That's crazy. In Kerala, I have Muslim friends. I don't see any lower caste Muslims. Only one difference is there is some people called Thangal. They come from Saudi and they are bloodline of Muhammad Nabi. I see.
If you went to him, he might say, well, yes, it's true. It was a good bill. Sorry I had to vote against it. But I had to trade that vote for somebody else's vote on an even more important bill. Very hard for you to know if he's telling the truth. Or he might have said, well, I voted it down because although I was in favor of the objective of the bill, I was hoping to get through another and better bill for that objective. Again, it's not easy to know that he's lying. You also have to pay attention to who your representatives are. I have occasionally taught undergraduate classes in California. And when I do that, I sometimes ask my students, essentially all of whom are old enough to vote, if they know the name of their congressional representative. And generally about half of them do. It's very hard to pay attention.
No, Abhay, not completely a drawback of capitalism. Yeah, of course, everything can have drawback. You can assign this to capitalism. But it happened because of government's corruption. Corrupt officials who had the incentive to do the non-corrupt thing went out of their way for extra money, etc. To allow these companies to become monopolies, or to allow these companies to take over basically any institutions, any mental health conversations, okay, like that John Money guy, okay. So now, how do we then make sure that government folks, politicians are more honest? We give them even less power. Any problem of USA that you can talk about mostly today, why has all of that started in the last 20-30 years? Not really much before that. It's because in the last 20-30 years, USA has taken the left socialist route very, very much. Why is Vivek Ramaswamy specifically talking about shutting down the bureaucracy, 75% cuts? It's because bureaucrats random agencies run the country more than politicians or ministers, governors, etc. themselves. Okay, those agencies, those bureaucrats have gigantic power to create any random license raj here and there. It's because of that gigantic power that they are being able to collude with the companies, because those companies are seeing a person in front of him who has immense power to grant any favors to their company. What if that person did not have that much power to grant them favors in the first place? Then there goes on being more market competition among all the medicine industries.
Mentioned how someone is voting if you don't know his name. So the basic argument is that we would expect voters in a democracy to be rationally ignorant of the information they would need to make the democracy work. What's the result of that? That voters support policies that sound good if you don't think about them. To somebody who doesn't know very much, they have no incentive to learn more, and you get a politics of sound bites and demagoguery. And the largest factor probably determining how most people vote is what views their friends are in favor of. Because if all of my friends are Tories and I come out for the Labour Party, my friends are going to think, what kind of idiot am I? And vice versa if my friends are Labour and I'm a Tory. So there's a lot of pressure on people to vote and to persuade themselves of whatever views the social circles they mostly believe in, and very little pressure to actually get the right answer. Let me give you another example of market failure on the political market.
Avinav, as far as if democracy is the main desirable way to go, then I think India is the best democracy in the world.
And that's political time horizons. Think about the question of how you get people to bear costs now for future benefits. Consider, for example, black walnut. Black walnut is a very pretty kind of lumber, but it's a rather slow-growing tree. And let us suppose, I'm not sure if it's correct, that it takes about 40 years for a black walnut tree to get big enough to harvest. And I'm considering buying some land and planting black walnut trees on it. 40 years from now, the value of the trees will be enough to repay the investment. I'm 73 years old. All right, it looks as though it would never pay me to do it.
Shivam Singh brings up a very important point. Environmentalists are also that license raj. In fact, environmentalists themselves are not the license raj, right? But especially in USA, the environmental protection agencies, the EPA, is the license raj. I don't think in India the environmental protection agencies have that kind of stronghold. I think they do, because we have so many strongholds from so many agencies that we don't see the environmental agencies as an extra problem. But I think they do have. But the environmentalists themselves just petition and protests and do protests. It's the agencies themselves run by the bureaucrats which are the biggest problem.
But it would, because 10 years from now, when with any luck I'm still alive, I can sell that land to somebody else. land with 10-year-old black walnut trees is worth more than land with newly planted black walnut trees. 10 years later, he can sell it to someone else. So in fact, it is in my selfish interest to make investments which pay off past my lifetime. All right. There is, however, a condition for this, and the condition is that I actually get the benefits. Suppose I believe that there's a sizable chance that 20 years from now, when the trees are big enough to be worth something, even though not full-sized, some enterprising person will drive onto my land in a pickup truck with a chainsaw at night and drive off with my black walnut trees. The higher that probability, the higher the payoff of the investment has to be to cover that risk. The same thing is true if I believe that it's possible that sometime in the next 40 years, an enterprising politician will decide that black walnut trees are obviously a national resource and will nationalize my property and my trees. Again, that risk means that I would only make the investment if it had a very high payoff. So the requirement...
Okay, Avinav is asking the nice questions. Okay, Ninar, the topic is, this is David Friedman, Milton Friedman's son, who wrote that book I bought a few weeks back, Guide to a Radical Capitalism, A Machinery of Freedom. This is his speech in Oxford Union. So we are basically discussing what happens when we do a lot of capitalism. So, yeah, I was going to answer. Yeah, Avinav. And which country is the best run in terms of economy? I mean, minimum government involvement in screwing up the economy. I think today, at the moment, it might just be India, considering that China, etc., are not the not a democracy. Of course, everything that you can talk about that it's a good socialist country or a good capitalist country. For an overall well-run country, you'd probably have to look at Nordic countries, but I don't really consider them that seriously because they are so small. They are so damn small. Like even Mamata Banerjee could have run that country probably. So in terms of big, large countries, India is probably the best run at the moment. But it's not because of capitalism. Of course, Modi is deploying capitalism to a large extent. But at the moment, there are people with good intentions in power, at least at the topmost sections, okay? Modi, Amit Shah, etc. And they are making people who probably don't have best intentions work really, really hard. It's going to be the same with Himanta Biswa Sharma. It's going to be the same with Yogi Adityanath. I am bothered about what happens when, again, these people go away from power, because these are once-in-a-lifetime politicians, once-in-a-lifetime public servants. You can't base and depend your entire society with the hope that such people will keep getting propped up. No, you'll be mostly met with absolute assholes. So how much power do you want to give to an asshole? Swiss economy is very well run. Yeah. Singapore is not a democracy, so we are not counting that. Small countries like Singapore, UAE are run very well. Yeah, but none of them are democracies. We are basing the criteria as democracy. Nordic countries are not running sustainable economies. Yeah, they are running really good at the moment. So in terms of big countries and democracy, I would say at the moment India is probably the best country in the world. Swiss can manufacture everything and produce food locally. Marxism, communism learns from mistakes. They don't. We have a beautiful ideology called wokeism. If the UAE was a secular democracy today, would it be the best country to live and work? It is already the best country to live and work, but it is not a democracy. And if it was secular the way India is, of course, no. I think it's already truly secular. Whatever any right-winger in India says when they say that this is not secularism, we want to do true secularism, that true secularism already exists in UAE. Swiss economy has everything despite its size. But is it really that invincible in terms of physical threats? We face physical threats as well. So since we are managing that as well, I think India deserves extra credit.
Requirement for long-term planning is secure property rights. Politicians do not have secure property rights in their political power. All right? A politician who does politically costly things now that provide a benefit to his successor 20 years later is being foolish in terms of his own interest. The successor has a 50-50 chance of being in the other party. It's not going to be him in any case. So he's going to bear the costs and not receive the political benefits. Now, I gave this talk last year in Brazil, in Rio. And it happened that Rio at that time was having a serious water problem, that it turned out that their water distribution system was not in very good shape. Why is it not in very good shape? Well, 10 or 20 years before, the mayor could have invested money on maintenance and on expanding the system to make sure everybody had enough drinking water. But there were other things you could spend that money on, things that would more directly buy votes, giving more welfare to voters, or giving contracts to companies that would make contributions to his campaign. You can think of lots of ways that one can spend money as a politician that give you short-term advantages. And it would have been foolish of him to spend money on projects which would only turn out to be useful 20 years down the road. So the result is...
Okay, M. Shastri, then tell me, in what ways is Estonia better than Switzerland, the Estonia which is the libertarian dream? How would you rate these two countries as a comparison, Switzerland versus Estonia? Australia is one Western country that still does fairly well generally. I would say so. Fair enough.
Is that one would expect politicians to have short time horizons. Now, oddly enough, politicians don't say this. Indeed, politicians routinely claim that they are doing things in a very far-sighted way with long-term benefits. And that's a very sensible thing for them to do, because the voters can't see the future.
M. Shastri, in overall quality of life, prosperity, safety, social harmony, law and order, that you don't have to worry about people stealing your things from your home, etc. All the opposite of California, New York, that is. And also in terms of defense.
And therefore you can claim benefits, whether or not you're providing them, in order to explain current problems. And I believe that the champion in this particular endeavor was an enterprising gentleman from the country of Georgia, except it wasn't a country at the time, by the name of Joseph Stalin, that he could not persuade the Russians that they had things well then, because in Moscow, which was the best place in the Soviet Union to be, people were living a family to a room in buildings. They knew they were poor, but he could say to them, yes, we are suffering now. We are all making sacrifices, but we're making sacrifices to build up Russian Soviet industry so that your children will be as rich as the Americans and your grandchildren will be richer than Americans. And for a decade or two, he could get away with that. Eventually, people notice that they are still as far behind America and Western Europe as they were before, and eventually, fortunately, the Soviet Union collapses, Stalin not being around by that time. But if you look at what politicians actually do, if you even pay careful attention to what they say, not when they're giving campaign speeches, but when they're actually talking about tactics, you discover that what they really want to know is what's the unemployment rate going to be at the next election, what's the inflation rate going to be at the next election, what are the visible measures people care about going to be in the very short term.
Yeah. Okay, Ninad and M. Shastri, the tax rates of Switzerland is pretty high, obviously, right? But obviously that should not matter to you if you actually get your money's worth. Are you really aware of anyone complaining about the tax rates in Switzerland? I guess there aren't too many people like that, right? But since so much of your taxes go to the government, and then after your, it would be that it's the execution of the good things that the government promises is actually happening. That's the problem with small countries, because almost any ideology can work in a small country because there are so many less numbers of people and bureaucrats that the one person at the top has to handle. Here, India is a gigantic 100 times larger than Switzerland, but it's still one person running the country at the top. So, which is why I'm saying probably Mamata Banerjee even could have run Switzerland well. Now, and that's proven by the fact that the other countries who are not as great as Switzerland aren't really disastrous like our neighbors, right? They're more or less pretty good countries to live in. Only I guess England has screwed things up the most. But of course, England is not exactly similar to any Nordic country. So the main arguments against capitalism are not applicable in Switzerland because it's a socially cohesive more or less homogeneous country and a very small country in terms of population. Let me see some important comments. Shastri, I was talking about Estonia, okay, not Latvia. Swiss have states divided along linguistic rates. Dada, what's your thoughts on Javier Milei, the Argentine president? I think he is a tool of USA, which is why he has gone against de-dollarization. Basically, he is rejecting the BRICS currency, etc. But he will come to terms with it, I think, in the next 5-10 years. But at the moment, Argentina's prosperity is going to shoot through the roof because for the short time, this gigantic steroid of libertarianism is going to wake up this comatose socialist country. In Switzerland, thing is that it is very decentralized, so tax does not change hands much, and that can be possible. Could have been possible if India was also a small country. I lived in Zurich. There was not a lot of complaint. The tax rates are not more than 40%, but you can move to a lower tax canton. Yes, exactly. And you see, most people know each other. It's still a very mafioso sort of a place. Everyone knows each other. Everyone knows the mafioso county head sort of those positions. Okay, but in India, everyone in those situations is mostly an asshole because he does not care on the human level for the people in his municipality because he doesn't even know most people. Okay, so that of course happens with a lot of population and so much migration. The migration is happening because so many people can't afford their lives somewhere else that they were living, and plus there is colonialism. We are a post-colonial society. Partition has happened. All those things. Caste is not really an ignorable factor here. Dada, don't you think? Okay, let me check some other comments. I lived in Zurich. There was not. Yeah. Don't you think that capitalism makes people too materialistic and money-minded, which can affect personal relationships? Comment. We judge people only on the basis of money they have. Yes, and it was not the case in USA forever. Remember, don't criticize capitalism based on the last 20 years of US history. Sukhasya mulam dharma, dharmasya mulam artha. Okay? Christian USA, Jewish USA never forgot that concept that it's not just about making money. The money is for your own freedom. What is your freedom for? For your freedom to make your life, your family's life as protected and as prosperous as possible, and also so that you can do God's work by giving donations to the local church, local foundations, or even send conversion money elsewhere. When that the religious or social duty, cultural duty point gets bypassed and it becomes sukhasya mulam, direct artha, then that society is absolutely screwed. Swiss is not homogeneous, it's quite heterogeneous. How come? Racially or in terms of religion? Stalin was an Hasura. Sri Aurobindo mentioned in one of his book. Yes, Stalin. Yeah, Sri Aurobindo mentioned. It's poverty mindset, Dada. Yeah, French, Swiss hate Germans and both hate Italians, and everyone hates the Roma. Swiss is not homogeneous. No, I'm saying inside Switzerland. If you move to Geneva, you have to learn French or pay a hefty recurring fine. If you live in Zurich, you learn German, right? Different languages and different states. Swiss democracy is actually a good model to follow. Okay, then Shastri, tell me, what do you think is the secret sauce here? Why is it still functioning even when people hate each other and when there is no cultural cohesion, according to you? Would that be again just because of low population? Because it's one person at the top not handling so many insane amounts of people like in India. It is career and individual oriented, not family oriented. This is one place I agree with Ankit Shah. Dada, do you think with increasing per capita GDP, we will be able to come out of these freebie socialist politics? AM thinks we can, and this benchmark is $5,000. It's a philosophy and a mindset problem. You could come out of freebies and go to that 5,000 GDP growth rate, 5% GDP per capita even quicker if you stop giving freebies. Because you are wasting so much money in leakages and paying the salaries and health benefits and the foreign holidays of bureaucrats.
Rational behavior by them, unfortunate consequences for us. Let me take the case of the regulation of medical drugs. We could also talk about recreational drugs, but not for this particular talk. Think about the incentives on somebody in the FDA in the US or whatever the equivalent is in the UK deciding whether or not to approve a new medical drug. he knows that there is always some chance that there will be very serious negative side effects that haven't yet been observed. There's a famous case real case of a drug that was given to pregnant women, and the side effect was a very small probability that when their daughters went through puberty, they would suffer a medical problem. All right, that means you'd have to wait 14 or 15 years to find out it was true. You'd have to give the drug to hundreds of thousands of people to get a large enough sample for it to be observed, and you'd have to know what to look for. That particular one, well, Bendectin is what it's called. That's another story. But the point is only that there's always some risk for a medical drug. And suppose you permit a drug and it kills 20 people.
Okay, interesting questions here. Great. I'll try to answer as many as I can. M. Shastri is saying they have a 3-language policy wherever Swiss learns the cantonal languages and learns to appreciate French, German, Italian culture. And Niner is saying Switzerland has slightly more population than, say, Jammu and Kashmir. And you see, that is why, since they have a population a little larger than Jammu and Kashmir, therefore, let them really face the challenges that India faces, which they will in the next 5 years. Regardless of whatever their manufacturing situation, illegal or legal Muslim citizens, immigrants will get into their country. Let's see how much their unity in diversity really remains when it's not just about hating the Italian language or the Italians, etc., but it's about a hatred much deeper ingrained in the human condition. Let's see what do they do when they are face to face with that. They are not trained for that. They are absolute cute puppies, vulnerable puppies. We are not. Switzerland has slightly more. Okay, they have mandatory conscription and their armed forces are mixed, not regimented on language. Yeah. Mandatory conscription has these benefits, but it has some problems as well, especially in big countries. And besides, I've never heard a retired military personnel say that he is in favor of mandatory conscription. They will always say that it should be about your personal swam seva. It should be about duty. They banned minaret, azan, and hijab. Yeah, they could. They could now. How long will they, do you think? It's not Hungary. Hungary and Poland I have some hope from, not Switzerland. Switzerland is filled with Pakistanis and Afghan. I have seen shops filled with them. Already it's happening. Let their population go to 5%. It will go to 5%. Switzerland's fertility rate is going to go down because it's filled with environmentalists. Let's see what happens in 5 years.
Your career is finished. You're the person who made that mistake.
And now, let's see what happens is 5 years is not a very good argument to criticize or appreciate any country. Every country might go to hell in 5 years. Every country might do really well in 5 years. So I'm saying they don't face the challenges we face.
Suppose you delay a drug and it kills 100 people. No cost to you at all. Because how does delaying a drug kill 100 people? You have an existing drug with a cure rate of 90%. There is a new drug with a cure rate of 93%. You keep that drug off the market for some years, and 100 people die who otherwise would have lived, but nobody knows who. They're statistical deaths. They are not observable deaths. And my favorite story on this is the press release where the US FDA admitted to killing 100,000 people. They, for some reason, did not put the press release in that form. What they said was that they had decided to approve a beta blocker, a drug used to prevent a second heart attack. Beta blockers had been in use in Europe for, I think, something over a decade at this time, and there had been people arguing that the FDA should approve it. They finally approved it, and they estimated that its use would save 8,000 to 10,000 lives a year. Well, if its use saves 8,000 to 10,000 lives a year, and they kept it out of use for 10 to 12 years, that means that they killed about 100,000 people. But as I say, that's not the way they reported the story.
Abhay, very good question, but it has to be a long answer. Abhay is asking, but don't you think too much material prosperity due to capitalism led to loss of faith in God? This led to the degeneration of society. I don't think it did. See, because of the prosperity, they kept funding liberal arts academia. Liberal arts academia came up with ideas like gender, social justice, etc. I don't think atheism is directly the problem here. I'll tell you why. First of all, even when in 2016 I start following American politics, Being an atheist, I notice, is a big thing, a gigantic thing. Bill Maher is getting criticized. Bill Maher is listening to debating people who are not atheists and talking about atheism. Whereas growing up in Bengal, I knew that everyone is an atheist. That might not be the case for entire India, but atheism seemed to be a common thing pretty much. But even when Americans were atheist or did not visit church all that often, they did not become that crazy woke people immediately. Maybe nothing happens immediately. Maybe you could say these were long-term effects of not believing in God. But you see, the problem was brewing elsewhere. The liberal arts academia was creating discourse which was remaining in the fringes. That fringe element in the academia got highlighted only after the 2008 financial crisis by the corporate big banks, who survived because the government stole money from people and handed them the bailout packages. They then decided how to avoid this the next time. Collaborate with the fringe ideas of academia so that next time it does not come on us. And we give people the impression that we are in fact good people trying to work for the justice of minorities and gender minorities, everything, all sorts of minorities.
Let me give another example.
But can we blame this on atheism or material prosperity? Now, I guess in the end, one backup argument will always be that empires rise and fall. So something bad was going to happen to any good thing anyway. So what do? Not do prosperity. Okay. Because of their prosperity, they were doing their religion even better. More people were donating to churches. More people were donating to their synagogues, their charities, religious charities, and funding conversion everywhere because of their prosperity. So, I guess I don't really see the direct connection with atheism in this case. Another thing you could argue is that the liberal arts academia ended up creating such problematic discourses because, again, their starting point is usually Marxism, which is an Abrahamic faith in itself. So they inculcated all the problems of any Abrahamic faith in their research and academia as well, which is why they want to sell Hinduism as also that theory-based identity. That no, somewhere I read that violence is bad, therefore Hindus must be peaceful and get killed no matter what the empirical evidence. So that kind of Abrahamic mindset also screwed the liberal arts academia. But of course, yeah, the glorification of atheism happened very slow. But when it happened all of a sudden a dam of atheism basically broke, and everyone started being atheists. Barack Obama's governance was his regime was one of the main culprits of USA's downfall.
Of market failure on the political market, and that's the pattern of redistribution to favor concentrated interest groups at the expense of dispersed interest groups. Right? We want a system where when something produces larger benefits than costs, it happens and otherwise doesn't. But in fact, we see the opposite pattern. And the standard example for an economist is an auto tariff or a steel tariff that economists have known for about 200 years now, since Ricardo published, that a tariff as a general rule hurts the country that imposes it. There are some special exceptions which don't have much to do with what tariffs actually get passed, but it's the right sort of rule of thumb. Nonetheless, almost all countries during that period and still have tariffs. The UK was the great exception in the 19th century. Hong Kong was the great exception in the 20th century. Those were both spectacularly successful economies. Hong Kong more than the UK, of course, since Hong Kong went in, 30 or 40 years from desperate poverty being richer than you are. Real per capita incomes are higher than in the UK. But both of those were successful polities. Nonetheless, nobody seems to want to imitate them.
AA is asking me, tagging me, will India Islamize eventually, organically? Please answer. Never. Not in our lifetimes, definitely, but never.
Why? The auto tariff benefits a small number of players, the auto companies and the auto union, and it imposes a cost on consumers and farmers. Consumers, because they're paying a higher price for cars, because there's a tax on importing cars. farmers, because if you import less, you export less, and the U.S. exports farm products. The way I like to put it is that the U.S. has two technologies for building cars. We can build them in Detroit, or we can grow them in Iowa. The way you build cars in Detroit is obvious. The way you grow cars in Iowa is that you grow the raw material cars are made out of, which is called corn. You put it on a ship. You send the ship out into the Pacific, and it comes back with Hondas on it. And that's a technology for producing autos, just like the other one is. And a tariff is a tax on that technology. It's a way of making sure that we will build cars even if it's cheaper to grow cars. What happens politically? The beneficiaries of a tariff face their own public good problem. That if Ford makes political campaign contributions to get a tariff, GM benefits by it. All right, so you have the same problem of how you produce something when the producer can't control who gets it. But a public good with a very small public is not such a hard problem, because if there are only 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 players, it's reasonably simple for them to get together. And for Ford.
Okay, Avinav is saying, can you answer my Poland question? You asked in the Poland question that how are they preventing these things? Yeah, they are a devout Christian country because of that reason. Okay, Abhay is saying, but I think Barack Obama also was a representative of the society which was going to hell due to high divorce rates and broken families. Yeah, and what caused that? That was caused by Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat. Okay, before that, Abhay asked another question that I wanted to but today the fringe academia is now funded by big tech capitalists. Yes.
Or to say to GM, look, we'll contribute 10 million if you contribute 15 million, you're bigger than we are, and we'll all do that if the United Auto Workers agree to do various things to get their people to vote for or contribute to or work for the campaigns of public-spirited politicians who support the auto tariff. So a small and concentrated interest group, if the benefit to them from the auto tariff is $10 billion, they can probably raise at least $1 billion to buy the tariff. All right. The victims, their cost could be $100 billion, but there's no way that a public of several hundred million people is going to raise even 1% of the value of stopping the tariff. So that means that even if the tariff imposes costs much larger than the benefits, it is likely to pass, as in fact tariffs quite commonly do pass, because the beneficiaries are a concentrated interest group and the victims are a dispersed interest group. So this tells us that it is, as a rule, politically profitable to benefit concentrated groups at the expense of dispersed groups, even if the cost is much larger than the benefit. What's my conclusion? The conclusion is more or less where I started, that on the ordinary private market, individuals must usually pay for what they use and get paid for what they produce. If you want to build cars, you've got to pay auto workers enough so they're willing to work for you. You've got to pay people who make steel enough so they're willing to do steel for you and all the rest of it. But it isn't always true. There are occasionally situations.
Yeah, which is something CPM doesn't get, or even West Bengal current government doesn't get, that the state electricity board fallacy, where power cuts are more common, and their excuse is that, see, we can't afford to keep the power on for 24 hours because it's so cheap. Why is it cheap? Because a rickshaw puller is also using that same power supply at that same price, but he doesn't even get the service. A rickshaw puller comes home and sees the fan is not running because he's paying so less for that electricity. Marxist historians call it the Bhakti cult and link it with Sufi, which is like the biggest scam. They control companies by ESG ratings. Yes.
Where you can impose a cost on somebody without his.
And all of that happened after USA turned left towards socialism, gave insane amounts of power to politicians and bureaucrats.
Consent, such as air pollution, and therefore market failure sometimes occurs. On the political market, individuals almost never bear the costs or receive the benefits of their actions. Thus, they have no incentive to make those choices that maximize net benefit for all.
Gautam, you have a great question here. I agree with half of it. Will India ever have world-class universities like Harvard, Oxford in Indian languages? It will have Harvard, Oxford like universities in our lifetimes, because especially a lot of universities are going to shift here. India is going to emulate them, make their own universities as great, hire those same systems, same framework, same people even. It's not going to be in Indian languages because the unipolar world idea is gone for now. No one's going to give a shit about any one country's language, especially with AI. AI is going to help you translate things in real time. No one's going to bother learning someone else's language. Maybe for that reason, Indian languages only will be the prosperous one and will not have a problem. even if that's the only language that the Indian equivalence of Oxford runs on. But everyone else in the world, or the students or the foreigner students in those universities, will probably not learn any Indian language, at least not for the education. Maybe they want to talk to their friends around in the neighborhood. For that reason they will not, they won't need to learn it for their academic purposes because of AI. So language game is gone. Another thing I wanted to respond, Modi government should come out with dharmic scoring. Yeah, it does not matter if it's called dharmic scoring or mug scoring, anything. What will it be based on? The Ankit Shah actually gave some pretty interesting ideas about India making its own indices. But you see, your ideas have to be fresh and original. Otherwise, you'll always be caught playing catch up with these people. Everything that you are today trying to do your version of, that's a loser's mentality. Because after something is done, you can't try to make something like that exactly and hope that it will have the same effect on the same numbers of people. Now you want a Hindutva YouTube, you want a Hindutva Twitter, you want Hindutva indices or dharmic indices. Why can't you make a completely different weapon, which you are probably good at making because it's coming out of your own brains, and not follow others? Because now that coup will never have the same integrity as Twitter. There won't even be the same numbers of people on coup. Even Trump's own Truth Social, even that did not succeed. Most right wingers are not in that on that platform because it's a copied idea. You can't have, no matter how much you want to support Pratyam will never be YouTube. Okay, and that copying mentality goes on in everything. Maybe in Bollywood only, the people all around them are going to change, and therefore they are going to have to end up making pro-India, pro-Hinduism, or at least not completely anti-Hindu movies. But in everything else, you have to get rid of this Hindutva version of something already existing in the Abrahamic or commie field. You have to come up with brand new ideas and weapons. Since I'm in no position to do that, I'm playing according to their own games, and I'm planning to defeat them on their own turf. You are talking about making your own turf, but in the exact same way that their turf already exists. You'll never win that way.
Hence, market failure is common. And that explains why market failure does a better job of predicting political outcomes than of predicting market outcomes. That on the private market, it's obvious from market failure theory that radio broadcasts won't be made, and yet they are. Externalities shouldn't be controlled, but often, though not always are. Compare a large shopping mall with the political equivalent of a small town and ask which is typically cleaner and safer. On the public market...
Abhay is saying, why couldn't capitalists stop the socialists from capturing the mind space? Because they benefit from it. It's the government who screwed up here, because the capitalist now benefits from socialists running the country, because the day, again the same thing, the day USA's middle class, lower class is wiped out because of illegal immigrants from all over the world, those capitalists, like Andrew Tate was saying, they'll live in South Bombay, they'll live in Dubai. Unko kya hai? So this mindset of government doing its job, protecting life, liberty and property, nothing more, nothing less. Capitalists doing just their business, not giving bhashanbazi on environment and social welfare, corporate social responsibility and the fuck all things. Those things cannot be allowed. You just sell me that product. You just protect life and liberty. End of story. If that happens, only then can these things be prevented. Otherwise, you create problems for the capitalist, whether it's his manufacturers who come from weird countries, or it's the SFI party worker. He will leave. No problem for him. He benefits from this.
Market. The economic argument for protective tariffs is out of date by 200 years. I like to say that reading public discussions of trade policy, I feel as if I was reading a discussion of the moonshot written in terms of Ptolemaic astronomy, where we were worried about whether the Apollo capsule would crash into the crystalline sphere that's carrying the moon around. But nonetheless, we get tariffs because they benefit the concentrated interest group at the cost of the dispersed. As Gary...
Adani Ambani would have gone woke already by now. It's only because BJP is in power that they are not going woke. BJP has turned the tide. it's not really BJP has turned the tide, but everything came together really well for good things to happen to India, right? There was a new middle class who knew that our lives sucked because of pre-1991 policies. Then social media happens because of capitalism. Sort of a right-wing awakening happens. With that, people get to know of Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro. Criticizing communism and socialism becomes somewhat acceptable in some circles at least. Therefore, and then Congress is a completely corrupt party. You have no absolute option other than voting for BJP in 2014. So BJP comes to power, who have a politics of their own. People get curious. What's this thing called Hindutva? Do I really need to care about the Ram Mandir? All these things converge at the same time. Therefore, wokeism gets delayed in India. Okay, like what I was saying about that Brahmin pride guy who keeps threatening me with physical violence for pointing out so many evil commie Islamist Brahmins in Bengal society. One of his arguments is that he has some extra brilliant Hindu credentials because apparently he and his villagers, he lives in a village, he's a first year, second year physics student, hasn't read anything other than STEM field books, obviously, and maybe that's a good thing. But again, because of that, he gives these stupid arguments. Not being woke, him and his villagers, that's the biggest achievement of his life, apparently, politically. What he's not understanding is that India would have been absolutely woke by now, if not now, in 5 years. If Congress had not screwed up, if Congress had actually executed everything they did and did not do so many corruptions, did not let A. Raja do Kanimurzi, all those things. If BJP had not come to power, if Congress was good enough to stay in power for another 5-10 years, that villager guy would be identifying as a girl by 2027. Bengal happily voted for Trinamool, is happily voting for Trinamool today, is happily voting for CPIM. Why would they suddenly draw the line at wokeism? They would not. They would absolutely embrace wokeism. Entire India would embrace wokeism. Adani would probably dance around in women's clothes. Ambani would embrace wokeism. They would fund gender transition studies for poor people. They don't care. They don't need to care. You don't need them to care. You just need to use Ambani's products. That's all. Don't expect them to be good people. Okay, they are not. You don't even need to know if they are good people or not. So, thanks to Congress's incompetence, we don't have wokeism for now, and will probably be delayed for a long time.
Becker, a fairly prominent economist who died not too long ago, unfortunately, pointed out farm policy in countries with few farmers is designed to raise crop prices to get the political support of the farmers. That applies to the EU, I think to the UK, and surely to the US. In countries with many farmers, typically much poorer countries, farm policy tends to have the purpose of holding down farm prices in order to buy the support of the urban mob at the expense of the dispersed peasantry. And that's exactly the opposite of the pattern you would expect for the naive model of democracy, whereas if there are lots of people, government pays attention to you, and if there are a few people, it won't. My conclusion then is that market failure is an argument for government intervention in markets, but a stronger argument against, once one remembers to apply the same analysis to both systems, to think of the political system not as benevolent demigods standing up there doing good, but as people just like us, and just like the people in the private market, each of whom has his own objectives and is trying to achieve them as best he can. All right? Enough politics. Let me go on to discuss other reasons why market failure is relevant to other things. And I will start out with my first example, that one way of winning battles is to arrange things so it's in the interest of the other side's soldiers to run. And if they run, you don't have to fight them. And that, of course, suggests the flip side of that. How do you keep it from being in the interest of your soldiers to run? And one way of doing it is a proverb, burning your bridges behind.
Okay, Rudvik and M. Shastri are saying two interesting things. Rudvik is saying people don't understand that only the West and Japan are category creators. Rest can only copy and optimize. Yeah. If I have to copy and optimize, if I am playing a game that you have set the rules of, I will try to play that game in that game and defeat you in that game, which is my idea of, therefore, not defending sociology. In fact, get into the academia, study sociology, get a PhD in sociology, but remember at the back of your mind what your agenda was. Fuck everyone after getting your PhD, not before that. Secondly, what M. Shastri is saying here is brilliant. He's saying we need our own indices for ourselves, not because the rest of the world has it. Yes. Don't think of, therefore, if you're trying to do indices as a way to fuck with other countries, you are late at this party. Those countries already have done that to you. You can't win at that anymore at the moment. So instead, why not make indices for your own country, for your own betterment, so that you can judge, analyze India's problems even better, and by solving those problems, because of those indices, you become an even more prosperous and a well-functioning country. So use indices to your advantage, right? Not just to screw with some other country.
Mind you, you march your army across a bridge.
Exactly what Rutvik is saying here. You can't randomly today make a Hindu version of anything in the world and get the reputation and following behind it.
The last few people across destroy the bridge, and you point out to your soldiers that there's nowhere to run to, so they'd better stand and fight. This is a high-risk strategy, but it sometimes works. Another strategy is to try to make the individual soldiers care a whole lot about their buddies, about the people around them, such that they give serious weight to the fact that if they run, they both will look like cowards and will result in killing people they care about. And the classical example of that, some of you may be familiar with, was a military unit in classical antiquity called the Sacred Band of Thebes. And the Sacred Band was made up of pairs of homosexual lovers, no one of whom would ever show cowardice in the presence of his beloved or abandon his beloved to die. And the Sacred Band won every battle they fought until the last, when they encountered a Macedonian army commanded by Philip of Macedon and his son Alexander, and they died to a man. That at least is the account we have. We don't know for certain if anything from classical antiquity is true, but it's a good story, and I think it illustrates the point of one of the approaches to solving this problem.
A's idea of controlling people into being dharmic, that is never going to work, because if your hope is to control people into behaving good, behaving nicely, then you are in the same boat as communists who have never been able to execute this idea of controlling people into doing good things that they consider good, and you'll either not be able to execute anything, or you will be ending up killing people, because at some point, if you have enough power, you'll think, he's not listening to me. I want to do good for him. Why won't he let me do good for him or for some other people? Then you'll end up killing him. So persuasion and convincing people, having debates with them is always a better way to go. Another great argument here that's going on here is that today people believe Kaizen for Chinese data rather than Bloomberg, because Kaizen has more accurate data. Yeah, we can really do with accurate, believable data. One thing I'm still, I have, I think, some hope from the Indian indices that are going to come out is that if they are at all on dharmic metrics, maybe not directly, maybe without using those words, they can still become a trusted source, One has to be that India has to be a reputed source for data, which they are not at the moment. Even if they are actually good data, no one trusts India for some reason. But the thing might change if India goes on giving really rock solid data, even which points out their own flaws. Then there's a trust factor that grows. But also with India's pop culture, mass media, there might be an intrigue, curiosity, and as a result, India might end up becoming an aspirational model for many things and many people who grew up into taking Indian indices seriously. So it might happen, but that's a long shot and that's a big if. So I think it's better that we absolutely do not focus on making indices to screw with someone else. Indices have to be for our own betterment so that we can pinpoint our problems and solve them.
Similarly, if you're running a firm, part of the firm design is to try to get it as nearly as possible so that the individual people in the firm have incentives compatible with the interests of the firm, which may mean dividing your firm in such a way that you can say, all right, this group of people produce this much money, this group of people produce that much money, therefore we can decide who should be rewarded, who should be fired, and so forth. Let me go on, however, to my own field, since I'm a professor, and discuss what I think of as the silent student problem. That I've just finished explaining something that I've explained 100 times before and could explain in my sleep. And I say to my students, now did everybody follow that? And nobody says anything. So I go on, and only when I grade the final exam do I discover my mistake. What is happening? Each individual student is saying to himself, well, I don't understand it. Possible the other ones do, I don't know. If I say I don't understand it, I'll look stupid to my peers. I don't like looking stupid to the other students around me. I'll look stupid to the professor, who may give me a worse grade eventually when it's all over. So therefore, I'll keep my mouth shut, and maybe somebody else will have a problem. Rational behavior with an unfortunate consequence. I have a solution to this problem. Now, I'm a theorist, so this is only a theoretical solution. I haven't actually implemented it. But it could be implemented. And my solution, there are probably better ways with current technology, but I'll give you the way I originally thought it up. And that is you arrange your classroom so that at every place there's a button on the floor that a student can unobtrusively push with his toe. So and at the back of the hall, there is a sign that shows how many buttons are pushed. So when I come to the relevant point, I say, now, will everybody who clearly understood the principle of comparative advantage, please push your button? And the number 2 appears on the sign at the back of the hall, and I go back and explain it again. All right? So these are all cases where market failure is relevant to various things. Let me give you another thing it's relevant to, which is relevant for some of you, and that's how to run a household. As it happens, my wife and I both cook. So sometimes I cook dinner, sometimes she cooks dinner.
Okay, we'll listen to this example after I again answer some questions. Dada, are you at all positive that in this third term we will see some drastic reforms? Is that why they are stressing on the parliamentary strength? No, they would focus on the parliamentary strength even if they were not going to do anything. So that's just election games. But yeah, you could argue that they are compromising so much with so many random politicians, maybe because of the reforms. But yeah, I think they are going to do reforms because we know from Modi's personal history, then Modi working with Sanjeev Sanyal, what are his real goals? The Modi that you see today is not his entirety. Modi has many other plans that he has even executed in Gujarat that he has not done so far in the center. So we absolutely know what this man's intentions are. Prashant Kishore and Modi were planning to work together to tweak IAS. They have not done it. Modi told Prashant Kishore that have some patience. Prashant Kishore did not have patience. So it's not like Modi does not want to do these things. Why am I mostly libertarian and still have such favorable opinions of BJP, whereas most libertarians think that BJP is a socialist hellhole? I'm noticing from BJP that it is taking the country in the right direction, economically, culturally, almost in everything. I'm in favor of that direction. I wanted to go more in that direction. Where I want it to go, BJP is not there anymore, but it is taking the country to that direction, and it will keep taking in that direction more in this third term. Absolutely. Okay, let me answer some more questions. Yeah, M. Shastri is saying Kaizen never had first movers advantage. Exactly, and that's why they did not make Kaizen to screw with other countries. They decided that no, in that game we can't really beat anyone. We are not going to be able to make up an index which is going to be taken seriously by India, Russia, or Africa. Okay, we will have to do something else. Why don't we give our own data and solve our problems best? What I'm ultimately saying is we need to put the hard work to become as accurate as possible. People will naturally believe you and follow you. Yes, and especially if such data shows uncomfortable things in your own country, which India's data is going on showing some from time to time. In some things, we have to defeat West in their own game, but some things have to, absolutely. There has to be lots of original creation. There's too much of Indian version of YouTube, Indian version of this, and Indian version of that. That's not going to work. Let me give you an example. Tushar Mehta index is now acceptable as a high quality indicator on or caste participation compared to Ashoka's caste index. I see. Dada, our argument proves that capitalism is just a tool which can be used for good or bad purposes. We need something more than capitalism for sustainability. No. Your first half is absolutely perfect, but your second statement is somewhat contradictory to your first statement, because if your first statement is true, you don't even need the second part. All I'm saying is make capitalism your bitch. Tie it up. Use it according to your own will. And that is not usually done with capitalism. People either run away from it or like it when it's actually eating up your own balls. Okay, literally even. Which is the exact case with mental health mafia. Commies who hate capitalism have no problem when capitalism makes a fool out of them. What is the mental health mafia industry about? Okay, what is the gender transgenderism surgery industry? It's all an offshoot of capitalism. The haters of capitalism here have absolutely no clue that it's incentive structures, capitalism, corruption, people doing people favors between US governments and American businesses. That's what's propping up these industries, and people think that no, it's objectively a good new idea that has come about in society because now we have become progressive. Arey bhai, don't be that stupid. Understand where capitalism is trying to fuck with you and use it to your own advantage, and propose and keep talking to people to demand policies where we can go on using capitalism to our country's advantage, not in a way that screws your fertility rate and makes everyone transgender. Wait, BJP RSS believe in gradualism, not in jhatka reform. Yeah. I'm not expecting anything on the religious line at all from at least Modi, maybe Hemanto or Yogi can. What do you mean by the religious line? What radical reform would you want in the culture or in the religion realm? Let me know, then I can comment on it. Me selling Che Guevara t-shirts are after importing them from Fuzu sweatshops. Yeah. Once we beat Germany, we can expect more religion policies. Niranjanda, watch Healthy Gamer. Yeah. Is breaking mental health industry using yogic philosophy. Yes. Whatever I have read of Indian spirituality and Indian philosophy, I'm already pretty convinced. Yeah, I wrote that to your comment as well when you talked about this. I have checked out his videos. Indian philosophy wisdom is pretty advanced when it comes to Western psychology. Uh, Carl Jung and all do get into some good spaces, but the current mental health industry is of course a joke. But in Indian spirituality and way of thinking about life is pretty good. Now the way to sell it is where the issue comes in, as Abhay was agreeing with me a few days back, that since a lot of people, I don't think it's really a lot of people, but a significant portion of urban people have grown up with such aversion to anything that looks saffron or religious in any way, they're not going to listen to anything that comes out of that person. So we'll have to talk about this in some other ways. But I personally am convinced that Indian religious books, philosophical books, have actually great solutions for mental health problems. Your mindset and ideology determines the use or misuse of capitalism. Yes. But you alone are not someone who can use or misuse capitalism, right? You can at best be a fool. But it's your government who you gave so much responsibilities. They are the ones who are unleashing capitalism as a Rottweiler on you, whereas that Rottweiler should be your guard dog. Avinam is saying UCC, I don't think it will be implemented. Madrasas won't be modernized. Formal education won't be made mandatory in madrasas, that sort of thing. I think all three will happen in these 5 years. UCC though will happen. I don't see why the others won't happen if Assam is already showing the way. I wonder, let's see.
And one possible arrangement would be that when she cooks, I clean up, and when I cook, she cleans up. And an alternative would be that when she cooks, she cleans up, and when I cook, I clean up. And the question is, which one is a better arrangement? And I'm only interested in opinion from people who cook, because if you're unfamiliar with the technology, you do not have the technical knowledge necessary to answer this question. Which one is better? Anybody want to tell me? Yes?
The first one.
Which is?
I cook, you clean up, and vice versa.
Yeah, I would say the opposite. Do you cook?
Yeah.
All right, huh. And you have no control over how much mess you make when you cook?
That's a good point, but well, it balances out because then the next time you add.
But we aren't talking about equality, we're talking about efficiency. The question is, either way is going to balance out, right? Either way, each of us is doing half the cooking, half the cleaning up. The point is that when I'm cooking, I can make a bunch of decisions that affect how much cleaning up there is to be done. I can decide to do a one-pot meal or to do something that involves a frying pan, a saucepan, and a broiler. I can decide while the water is coming to a boil for the pasta whether to spend the time cleaning up the frying pan that I used to saute the onions in or whatever. There are a bunch of decisions that I can make which will affect how much work there is to be done. Now, it's true I love my wife, but nonetheless, costs to her are less obvious to me than costs to me, and I suspect the same thing is true of her, even though she loves me. And therefore, if we follow the rule we in fact do follow, which is that whoever cooks dinner is responsible for cleaning up that meal, the result is that each of us has an incentive to properly take into account what would otherwise be external costs in doing it. So that at least is my argument. Let me give you another example. I assume that at least a few of you have had children and most of you have been children. So imagine that your child has just made a mess, has just dumped all of the Legos out of the box and onto the floor. And there are two things you could do. You could clean up the mess yourself, or you could get your child to clean up the mess. Probably getting your 3-year-old to clean up the mess is more work than cleaning it up yourself. Nonetheless, it would probably be prudent for you to get the kid to clean up the mess because they then has an incentive not to make a similar mess again. Finally, think about a market failure as a profit opportunity. Market failure implies that there is some other outcome from what you did that is on net an improvement. So an entrepreneur who figures out how to get that outcome might end up with some of the gain. For example, the first person to think of combining advertisements with radio or TV broadcasts. The first developer of a shopping center. Or a company that gave away for free the use of a search engine online in order to find things on the web. and charged companies for being easy to find, which was Google's business model, which made them, I think, by now several $billion. All right. Finally, I want to go to the idea of designing around market failure.
Okay, we'll discuss this next point again after I've read some questions, read some points. Nino is saying, I think next 10 years are going to be stable in terms of policy. I agree. Overall burden on Hindus will be lighter. I agree. Beyond that, Hindu society must take responsibility for our future. I agree. Dada, you should do a live stream of Barclay's interview to Milan Vaishnav. Oh, acha. I think I'll do it after we've finished the Barclay book, okay? So that we can counter her better after reading her complete views from that book. Okay. He used to follow me on Twitch. Okay.
Finally, I want to go to the idea of designing around market failure. And I will do this with a story. Fictional story, I'm afraid, this time. Two Bedouins are riding their camels through the desert, a couple of miles on from the oasis. And one of them starts complaining about his camel. This snail I am riding, disguised as a camel, has got to be the slowest beast in all the deserts of Arabia. And the other Bedouin says, you think your camel is slow? This rock I'm sitting on has got to be even slower than your camel. And they get into an argument about whose camel is slower. And they finally agree on a bet, that whichever Bedouin's camel gets to the oasis last, his owner wins the bet, and the other one must pay him a golden dinar. Well, you can think pretty easily what's going to happen, that the first camel goes slowly, the second goes more slowly because he wants to win the bet. The second goes more slowly still. And an hour later, there are two Bedouins sitting their camels stock still in the blazing sun in the middle of the desert of Arabia with the oasis still a mile away. At this point, a wise man comes walking along and he says, why are you two idiots sitting your camels stock still in the blazing sun in the middle of the deserts of Arabia with the oasis a mile away? And the two Bedouins get off their camels to explain the problem. And the wise man says two words, at which point the Bedouins jump on the camels and ride off to the oasis as fast as ever they can. What are the two words?
Switch camels.
All right. Each one is riding the other one's camel and therefore wants it to go as fast as possible rather than as slow as possible. So that's a nice example of engineering around market failure. If you want more stuff, my website is www.daviddfriedman.com. I gather that the internet
Okay, now Q&A.
connection in this room is not very good. Otherwise, it is, but it's sufficient to find the website because I've got 3 or 4, about 300 medieval recipes because cooking from very old cookbooks is a hobby of mine and my wife and daughter. Some poetry, a good deal of other stuff, lots and lots of stuff. The web is a rather clumsy technology for selling information, but an absolutely beautiful technology for giving information away. So the real trick of exploiting the web is figuring out ways of getting what you want by giving information away. So that I, for example, get people to pay the cost of my coming to Europe and giving talks and get a chance to explore various interesting cities. This is the 8th city I've been in on this trip by giving away lots of information on my webpage.
Abhay, great question. My point is, who with what values and mindset makes capitalism his or her bitch? How should we create that mindset which will lead to good use of capitalism? You have to learn from countries where capitalism is being put to great use. I would argue 50s to 80s USA, just the post-war USA up until, let's say, probably Bush Sr. or even Bill Clinton. Let's say even up till 9/11. Why not up until 2006-7? Okay. USA was the best country to be in. Notice in which eras which country has had the most numbers of immigrants. That should tell you who was doing capitalism best. At least in comparison to the other countries of that particular era. From the time that USA started having the highest immigration to the time it's going to stop having the highest amounts of legal immigration, that's when you know that country is doing capitalism more or less well. Even now, people who are opposed to transgenderism are flocking to USA because either they think that transgenderism is not a problem, or they think the payoff that we get even if we live close to transgenderism is still better than living somewhere else where they probably don't have transgenderism but is as a bad society to live in anyway. Which is why that guy's argument of not being woke being his biggest achievement is a lame argument. Not being woke can't be your only achievement. But also what you mentioned here, that what kinds of thoughts can make capitalism your bitch? By knowing that capitalism is a great thing and by understanding what is its potential. why do you think people who started out with such a society had that idea of an LLC, a private limited? Because they didn't want a company doing anything other than selling that product they were selling. Because they are rich people, they have the potential to do many other things. We are not going to allow them legally to do all those many possible other things. The moment they allowed that because of corruption and because of sarkar ko kuch karna chahiye mindset, that's when everything went to hell. Like Vivek gives this example of sometime in Europe, I think 100 or 200 years back, the British monarchy is giving out some licenses to some company to build a bridge, but they are legally not allowed to do any single thing other than build a bridge, not even do any philanthropic thing, because we don't know what your intentions are. You are a rich man. It's okay that you are a rich man. I have no problem, but you will not do anything with that money other than reinvest in your business.
Thank you.
I'll ask a couple of questions before opening up to the audience, if that's all right. So you started off your career actually studying to be a physicist. Could you talk about why you decided to go into teaching law and economics instead, and what the transition was like?
Sure. The reason I went into physics was that I did not want to spend my entire life being introduced as my father's son, and my father was a very prominent economist. And I eventually concluded that I was a better economist than a physicist, since I was doing economics as a hobby and physics as a profession at the time, and that I therefore bit the bullet and switched fields. So that would be the simple answer.
Perfect. All right. So the conclusion of on market failure today was that there are stronger arguments against, and you described yourself as a theorist. But given that in many industries there is already government regulation set in place, how do you think we can actually go about deregulating and privatizing?
That is, you can deregulate by removing regulations. That's sort of.
But for instance, for
obvious.
something like the legal system, which you've argued.
That's a much. Everything I've said so far could have been the views of a pro-free market economist. I am in fact an anarchist. So I would want to carry these arguments all the way to replacing everything government does with private arrangements, and not just going back to sort of a 19th century laissez-faire system. That's a much harder project, and I think it's not going to happen rapidly. But if one of the things on my website is a link to the second edition of my first book, part 3 of that sketches what a society might look like in which making laws and protecting rights had all become private activities. So what I'm describing there is a system where each individual is the customer of a firm that sells him the service of protecting his rights and settling his disputes. Every pair of such firms recognizes that violent conflict is very expensive and that there are potentially going to be conflicts between their customers. So each pair of firms agrees in advance to a private court, an arbitration agency that will settle disputes between them. Now, that agreement can't be enforced by any government, because there is no government in what I'm describing. But what enforces that agreement is the fact that they're repeat players, that each firm knows that if, when the court rules against their customer, they refuse to go along, then the other one won't go along when it rules the other way. That then gets them into having their employees shoot at each other. That makes it really hard and expensive to hire employees, and your customers don't really like having their front yards turned into free fire zones, so therefore the firms are better off settling it peacefully by arbitration. And then the laws are ultimately being made by the arbitration agencies, which are trying to set up legal rules and procedures that the rights enforcement agencies will want to buy, and the rights enforcement agencies are trying to buy legal rules and procedures that their customers will want to buy in order that they can get people to buy the services from them instead of a competitor. That's a very short version. The third edition of the book, which you can get for I think $3.90 as a Kindle at the moment, or is about $10 as a print-on-demand book from Amazon, has got some expansions of the arguments and more analysis of the economics of that system. But that's the sort of short and simple version. So for economists in the room, my claim is that will tend to produce economically efficient legal rules in the normal sense of economically efficient, maximizing. For philosophers, economic efficiency, though people don't usually put it that way, means maximum utility, where interpersonal utility comparison is done as if the marginal utility of income was the same for everybody. And this, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Alfred Marshall at Oxford, or was he at Cambridge? Cambridge, all right, because that's basically economic efficiency is really coming out of Alfred Marshall's idea of economic improvement, but modern textbooks mess it up because they're trying to pretend they're not doing interpersonal comparisons, so they bring in all of this Pareto nonsense, which is a way of pretending not to do interpersonal comparisons when you're really doing them. And I prefer to bite the bullet and follow Marshall instead.
Perfect. Now's the
This Pareto nonsense. Okay, great tough questions. Abhay is saying, but don't you think that obsession with money due to capitalist mindset led to bringing women into workforce, for which antinatalist ideologies, antinatalist ideologies and policies were propagated and implemented? See, even if women did not go to workforce, antinatalist ideology was going to come in anyway because of environmentalism and the Malthusian model stuff. But as for your first question, that's actually a separate question, that do you think women were brought into the workforce in the first place because of capitalist greed? Yes, they were, and they were being resisted. But you see, here, the solution to this problem is very tough. This I shouldn't really answer without a lot of data, because a lot of people are happy with this women being brought into the workforce thing, because their argument is that when you do have a bad husband or bad in-laws, because what is Ankit Shah's one remedy or antidote to your husband or your in-laws behaving badly with you? Because your relatives can come and take up the matter with them, that why are you behaving badly with them? What if their intervention doesn't do anything? Or what if they also say that suck it up, no matter how much they behave badly with you, how much they shout at you, how much they make you work like a slave, how much they beat you, doesn't matter. Suck it up. And all of that suck it up, or basically, let's say, what other things can the girl's family can really say? They would say therefore that, okay, no, stay in the marriage because you don't have anything else to do. So all of that vulnerability is there because that girl doesn't earn. So there's a problem with that. Now, a lot of happy marriages, I would argue, where the woman does not work, is actually just a facade. That happiness, which I don't really have a problem with. I think there are many places where facades and actually rituals, which does not have any scientific or any logical basis, actually are a good thing. But that facade of good marriage, which I think is a great thing, was in fact because of the financial dependency of the wife on the husband. In many places, that might not be the case, which is why we can't have this conversation without actual data, and I don't think actual data is even possible. How are you going to prove that a wife really loves her husband because of the person he is, or she really loves her husband because she has convinced herself that I have nowhere else to go, so why don't I just love this man no matter what he is? So, in terms of limiting some vulnerability for women, bringing women into the workforce was probably a good thing. Now, why I say probably, and we can't talk about this without data, is because women coming into the workforce, did that have net benefits for the woman, her family, or for society in general? Or was society better off when women or wives were in fact dependent and vulnerable? For the larger society, in terms of birth rates, etc., of course, the past times were great, but now we can't really have data of the ages of mental health data or lifestyle data of women from past thousands of years, and really go back and ask them, were you happy this way? Would you have really preferred a job? Some will say yes, some would have said no. So this is an impossible conversation to have. So I guess I'll say it's here, make your peace with it, and at this moment, the only solution is conversations and sharing with your partner, your wife, husband, whatever. There's no any other way to talk about this or tackle this problem at all. Nirajanda, one question on this: Junior Friedman, isn't he obnoxious for his liberal views, asking Israel not to attack MMS? Yeah, that's the problem. One first thing is, of course, libertarians are very much against any kind of war. Against every libertarian in the world is against Israel attacking Hamas. The bigger problem is that they don't know anything of religion. They don't know the data of Muslim countries, Muslim people. Of course, if you go around talking about the problems that comes out of having too many Muslims in your country, they will say that it's US who has bombed those countries for so many years. That's why those Muslims get created. Now you have to go back to Indian history's data. They will say, no, the Armenian genocide was probably an aberration, and all the complaining that the Hindus are doing are probably results of Hindutva historians. You'll have to have a conversation with them that no, even non-Hindutvadi historians have said those same things. They listen to those things, basically arguments that we have all now imbibed in our heads. After only that, People like David Friedman can be convinced, but of course he's not going to go through that rigor. His field is something else, so you'll have to basically suck it up that he is going to be uneducated on that topic. I'm hearing of studies that women in 60s and 70s were happier than women today. Yes, and that study means absolutely nothing, because how do you know she did not make her peace with that vulnerability and therefore said that they were happy? They might have been happy. I think they might have been happier back then because their health was obviously healthier, better. They were not taking so many abortion medicines. What's that pill called? I pill. What? Anti-contraceptive pill. Yeah. So anti-contraceptives are. Oh no, they are just called contraceptives, right? Not anti-contraceptive. Yeah. So contraceptives are insanely bad for your health. You are sitting at home working on your laptop or working in an office, going in an Uber, and sitting eating fast food all day. Zero workout. You don't have to go walk, run anywhere. If your health is that screwed up, you're definitely unhappier than a 60s and 70s woman. But how much is that because of financial freedom or not? We'll never know. A strong anti-corruption program will wipe away police support. Yeah. Everyone was poor, so not sure what you are talking about. Local mullahs. Okay. I'm okay with limited welfare schemes, but the freebie politics must not go crazy. No. All of it needs to go.
It's a good time to open up to the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to reach you. And please stand up when you ask your question. We'll start with the second round.
Thank you very much, Professor. I loved your presentation, so thank you for it. My name is Joshua. A question with regards to climate change. You mentioned Stalin, sacrifice now for your children's benefit. Something like President Trump exiting.
Okay, so did Stalin not believe in the one life concept, which is why he said that sacrifice your current situation for your children?
The Paris Climate Accord. Is that because the costs in the short term outweigh the benefits in the long term? I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Well, I assume that whatever President Trump does, he is doing it because it believes it will get him status, increased chance of winning the next election, and so forth. I doubt very much that he gives heavy weight to the welfare of people 100 years from now. But no, climate change is an interesting case in two different senses. One of the talks I sometimes give is on climate change and population, because I really got into this controversy about 40 years ago when the issue was overpopulation that was supposed to be killing us all. And my view on both of those is that you have both positive and negative external effects, that they are quite uncertain in size, and therefore we do not actually know if climate change is going to make us better or worse off. That if you start out being sure it'll make us worse off, you only look at the negative effects and you say, aha, it makes us worse off, and you can get the opposite result the other way. But the question in terms of the discussion today is not whether climate change is good or bad, but why do governments act as they do? And I think the answer is that the governments act, as in my example of Stalin, in terms of what story they can sell to the voters, that the U.S. government would like excuses to give money to people who support the right politicians, and I presume the U.K. government would like as well. If you can say to people, we've got to promote solar power or wind power or something like that in order to prevent catastrophic climate change, that's why I'm taxing you in order to subsidize these nice people who are doing that. That gives you a useful excuse to do something you'd like to do. My standard example on this is the largest single climate change policy that the U.S. government has, and that's biofuels. The U.S. currently is turning about a third of its corn crop, maize for those of you who use corn in the old English sense, into alcohol. The current view of people who are experts in the field is this does not in fact reduce total CO2, that once you take account of the amount of CO2 produced in producing the maize and in transporting it around, it's roughly a wash. Why does it do this? Because it drives up the price of a major crop and therefore buys votes from farmers. And in fact, an American politician who has been very prominent in his concern with climate change actually admitted in public that part of the reason he originally came out from biofuels was he was trying to get nominated for president, and Iowa has primaries very early in the primary season. And I should say, this policy, aside from having no effect on climate change, is probably the largest contribution of the U.S. government to world hunger and world poverty, because the U.S. is the largest producer of maize. The amount of maize we're taking off the market is probably somewhere around 15% of the world's supply. And that means that an important food product is scarcer and more expensive for people who consume it. So that's a fairly clear example, I think, where you have a policy justified initially on the grounds that we've got to save the world 100 years from now, but in fact driven entirely by political forces. But
See, did you all hear this point? How environmentalist policies, which are agreed upon by the American state, is creating world hunger, shooting up the prices of maize. At least that. These things are similar in many other fields as well. Okay, let me respond to some comments here. M. Shastri Singh, Dada, don't you think Modi government should improve prosecution rates for agencies like ED? I don't understand why Modi won't improve their throughout. Improve their output, do you mean, right? I think Modi, like in all other fields, is also picking his battles. First of all, he wants to use it as a political tool so that only that washing machine thing goes on. But I think pretty soon he'll come for BJP politicians as well. It's all a hope on Modi's good character, which I think he has proven with a track record. With good character, I don't mean whether he secretly has some slave in his garage tied up or not, but I mean in his public profile, you can expect good things from him. Now, he will use ED when it is convenient for him. He will increase the output of ED when it is more convenient for him. That is just the nature of how inherently corrupt a democracy can get, and in a gigantic country like India with not much homogeneity. There is some cultural homogeneity, which is why it's still an intact country, which is why it's the same GDP per capita as sub-Saharan countries and still functions like almost a first world country. Maybe not as remotely almost, but well, okay. We are in the same category as many first world countries, I think. Even though our earning is like that of sub-Saharan countries. So in such a country, a very powerful prime minister will end up using ED. At least he's using it for some good. Now, of course, I can criticize that. I hope some good comes out of that criticism. And someday people realize that it can be done even without using ED as a washing machine designator. Okay. Abhay Singh, don't you think teaching the society to respect women for being homemakers is solution? Also giving rights to homemakers in spouse property is solution? No. Government doesn't really have to do much in this case. Some societal movie, etc., pop culture based on indie YouTubers and the society in general, their thoughts, those things can shift the conversation. But you see, the idea that women work for free their entire lives, housewives work for free their entire lives, there was an inherent mathematical flaw in that argument, which has never been solved, and which is why if you try to solve for that now by doing nice sounding things like Lokhir Bhandar, that you are no longer economically vulnerable and dependent, so you don't have to even work. Just be a woman, have a vagina, and get 1200 rupees. It's all based on the premise that women work their entire lives basically for free. They are essentially a slave. Actually, they are not. They get a lifetime of free housing, clothing, and fooding, based on maybe culture, social responsibility, love in the last few years, respect, responsibility, duties. But it's all based on a very crass, dry truth. You give me kids, let me have sex with you, I take care of your fooding, clothing, and housing for your entire life. Which is why Nietzsche says, truth, this is truth. And this truth is ugly. I am not in this world just for giving birth to babies as a man, or just to kill people. And if I'm a woman, I'm not here just to give birth to children and let someone have sex with me. No, I want something more. That more is art. That art is religion, culture, stories, mythologies, archetypes, okay, where it's something more. There's some duty, love, etc. But even if we get down to bare bone economics, they were never a slave just doing things for free. I guess some feminists have argued that, in fact, even a slave was never really doing anything for free. Even he got housing, clothing, etc. But then we need to get into the economics of slavery as well.
But if people want to, maybe after this people want to talk about climate change, because I've been in that argument for a long time, and I think it is clear that there are large positive effects that tend to get ignored, as well as large negative effects. And I first got into this on population a very long time ago, when population, for those of you who are from some of the older people here may remember, when population had essentially the same status in the public discourse that climate change does now. That sort of we were being told that all the experts knew that increasing population was going to doom us. You had somebody seriously claiming that in the 1970s there would be unstoppable mass famines killing hundreds of millions of people, and all we could do was to decide which hundreds of millions would die. And it didn't happen. What actually happened was the exact opposite of the prediction, that poor countries' calories per capita went up instead of down. But we're getting the same pattern again with climate change for, I think, many of the same reasons.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So now on to the next question. We'll go to...
Okay, Abhay's questions are going to take entire nights to answer. I agree with you, Dada. Homemaking is not unpaid labor. Spouses cover their expenses, but they have no financial security. How can we ensure financial security? The ensuring part might be today a lost cause unless you believe in God. The marriage itself is a sacred religious duty, which is that ensuring part of that you'll have financial security forever because I'm your husband. Obviously, I'll pay you. What else will I do? That kind of mindset, that kind of value on marriage as an institution was placed for these very things. Now that has gone down to drain, now that divorce is always a very easy option to pursue, now that there is financial security in other ways, whether Lokhir Bhandar or the woman working, now you are never going to have anything other than a conversation between a husband and a wife. No way to address this problem.
To the front row, in the red.
Hi, so thank you very much for your talk. It was fascinating about some of the problems we do have, but I would just like to bring back to sort of the rational voter thing being sort of the key to some of this. Yeah. You argue that basically everyone will be rational and act in their own interests, but I sort of disagree with that. I think that people will be illogical, people will be working for other people. There are people out there who are willing to work despite their own costs, despite their own pain. And in terms of how that relates to government, I think instead of perhaps just scrapping all together, would accountability not be better? Would opening up government and opening up everything and the way that decisions are made be a far better way of regulating all these rational free market failures as well as the illogical ones?
Yeah. There are certainly variations of what individuals want to maximize. And there are some people, I think most people give weight to the welfare of those immediately around them, that I care a lot about my wife and my children. I care a good deal about my friends. I care somewhat about other people I don't know. I think very few people give anything like as heavy weight to the welfare of random strangers as to the welfare of themselves and those close to them. If you think about it at the political system level, though, consider two people, one of whom is actually concerned with the welfare of, say, everybody in Britain, and one of whom is actually concerned with winning elections. Which of them do you think is more likely to end up in power?
It all depends on what they say. I mean,
The one who wants to win elections can always say anything that the first guy could say that works, that people will believe, the other guy can say too. But he has the advantage that he can also say things that sound believable and aren't true, whereas the first guy can't. So going back to the voter, I don't see how you're going to open things up in such a way that the people generating the information have no control over what information is being generated, and in such a way that it is cheap and easy for the individual voter to find out what is or is not true. And I think if you look at the behavior of voters, that lots of people would like to think of themselves as well-informed and idealistic, and it's really odd how all of these well-informed and idealistic people, just about half of them end up believing X is good and half of them believe X is bad, and sort of not the result you usually get in science where people are trying to discover things. So I think you ought to think through a little more carefully how you make things open in such a way that you change the incentive structure that I've described, both for the voters and for the politicians.
Perfect. On to the next question. So we'll go to Ashley, the hand all the way on the back.
Let the last be first.
So with the Lego example of making your 3-year-old clean up, so that could disincentivize the 3-year-old to play with Lego and instead play with something easier like a doll or something like that, whereas Lego might have. So there's a difficulty with finding out what the actual incentives.
Abhay, your question that if homemakers are thrown out of the house someday, where will they go without house or money? Is it a rhetorical or a model question or a real life practical question? In that case, is my volume really low? Okay, see, first of all, they have their their parents' home to go to, or if their parents are dead, then they are, I think screwed. What happens in that situation if they are very old? I guess some charity organization picks them up, right? But completely vulnerable. That is why there are limitations to the argument of people stopped becoming homemakers just because Rothschild told them to. Of course, Rothschild did tell them to, but I think it got lapped up very easily because so many other vulnerabilities were getting solved for. Because you can't trust, if you can't trust your husband to not kick you out, you are very screwed.
Are there any solutions for that, or is it inherently difficult to or impossible to fully kind of understand what the incentives actually are?
I guess my general view is that the right way to do child rearing is as much as possible to let the children make the decisions themselves, so that now you can't do that perfectly, it's certainly not with a 3-year-old, but not much past the 3-year-old, I'm willing to accept the idea that they get to decide, do I want to combine the costs and the benefits of doing this? When one of our rules when we had kids was that our children did not have to eat what we were making for dinner, provided that the child could find himself something that was no extra work for us and was nutritionally adequate. So that our son ate a good deal of fruit-flavored yogurt, which is no work to prepare and is reasonably good for you, and we had it in the refrigerator. And our children were unschooled, meaning that rather than having this is what you're learning this week, we encouraged them to get interested in things, we tried to help them with what they're interested in, but we did not say, this is the homework you have to do, this is the book you have to read, or whatever. Now that's less true for a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, but even at that level, I think kids are to some extent rational and to some extent know their own interests. I should say, let me quote Adam Smith for a moment, since we're in Britain. Now, Adam Smith, I should say, was not a fan of this university, to put it mildly. I think his comment was that the public professors here had given up even the pretense of teaching. But Smith comments about the discipline in schools being designed entirely for the convenience of the teachers and not the welfare of the students. That students are compelled to attend lectures and then forbidden even to express their disapproval in various ways. And he goes on to say that in the case of children or young boys, some compulsion may be required in order to obtain the rudiments of education, but beyond the age of 11 or 12, compulsion need make no part of education. No compulsion is required to make people attend those lectures that are worth the attending, as is known where such lectures are given. Just a wonderful passage of The Wealth of Nations.
Niner is asking the tough questions. Why would a husband kick their wife out in old age? He himself will need company. No, would be totally stupid and never heard of this. What if that 60-year-old husband is a sugar daddy for 18-year-old women? And what if he thinks he has fallen in love with such a woman and therefore kicks their wife out? Of course, who is protected by some compensation.
So I agree entirely. I'm actually from the Taking Children Seriously movement, which is, very much like that. But what I was wondering more is the difficulty in understanding what the incentives actually are.
Yeah. Well, I think you can see the incentives. The kids don't like to clean up messes generally. And the real question you're asking is whether there is a benefit to the kid due to playing with Legos, which he is not allowing for and therefore won't compensate the inconvenience to him of cleaning up it that you should. And I could imagine such cases. Certainly parents are willing to bear sizable costs for their kids, but I still think that the right rule of thumb is to teach them the lesson when you make a mess you have to clean it up, because that's a very valuable lesson for people to learn.
Perfect. Thank you. I will go to the gentleman in the back.
Hello, I understand you don't want to be introduced in light of your father, but I was wondering if you could perhaps tell us a critique of your father's work, because from my understanding, you seem to have moved away from the neoliberal philosophy, and I was wondering if you could share your thoughts of your father's work, perhaps.
I would say that most of his work I'm not competent to critique, because I haven't worked in macroeconomics at all. I guess the only significant disagreement is that his view was that the stateless society that I described might work but probably wouldn't, and my view was that it might not work but probably would. And that's not the kind of thing where you can do a clean argument to prove one of us is right or one of them is wrong. It's really a judgment call for both of us. I discuss in the third edition of my first book, I discuss forms of market failure on the market for law, ways in which my system won't give you the right answer, of which there clearly are some, and I discuss reasons why my system might be unstable. In particular, it's the two vulnerabilities of the stateless system I describe. One of them is to foreign states invading, because national defense is a public good, and the other is to cartelization of the rights enforcement agency, that it's possible that the private firms enforcing rights will decide that robbery is more profitable than business and reinvent the government. And I discuss what circumstances will make those things more or less likely, and I think his judgment on that was more pessimistic than mine. But other than that, I don't think, as I say, there are views he had that I'm not competent to discuss, but in general, I think I agreed with most of his views insofar as I understood them.
Great. We have time for one more question, so we'll go to the front row.
Thank you very much for your talk. I have two questions, if that's okay. So, first of all, on the point of tariff, what do you think about the infant industry argument? So you talked about the success of Victorian England as well as Hong Kong in the 20th century. But what about the success of countries like South Korea or Taiwan, which protected their industries when they were in their early stages of development? Because I think comparative advantage could change over time between different countries. I think that's a very interesting argument. And second of all, because I'm a kind of libertarian myself, and as an anarcho-capitalist, do you have any moral arguments against the existence of the state, as well as the utilitarian considerations?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
On your first one, as I think I said, one can imagine circumstances where a tariff will produce benefits. Generally, those are not the circumstances where you get tariffs, because generally infant industries don't have much political effort, and what you tend to get are senile industries, like the U.S. steel industry, having the political muscle to get tariffs. The Hong Kong, without tariffs, did better than Taiwan or South Korea. I don't know enough about Taiwan or South Korea to be able to say how significant whatever protective tariffs they had were. My impression is that quite often, if you look at the countries as they developed, the thing the government was pushing was not the thing they were good at. That India was subsidizing its auto industry at a point when they could have bought secondhand autos very cheaply from the US and Europe. Instead, they were too poor to use secondhand autos, so they had to build very expensive new autos. So I just think that if you look at the developing world in general, that the pattern is usually that the intervention made things worse rather than better. On the
Listen to this point and argument again.
My impression is that quite often, if you look at the countries as they developed, the thing the government was pushing was not the thing they were good at. That India was...
Guys, this is such an important point that a lot of BJP supporters really need to get into their heads. The socialist Hindutwadis. Listen to this entire point, okay?
And second of all, because I'm a kind of libertarian myself, and as an anarcho-capitalist, do you have any moral arguments against the existence of the state, as well as the utilitarian considerations?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
On your first one, as I think I said, one can imagine circumstances where a tariff will produce benefits. Generally, those are not the circumstances where you get tariffs, because generally infant industries don't have much political effort, and what you tend to get are senile industries, like the U.S. steel industry, having the political muscle to get tariffs.
So you see, isn't he in a way defending Modi's policy of sort of protecting the startups in a sort of an ecosystem, giving them a helping hand? See, Modi listens to such diverse, weird sorts of people. Not weird, I mean, such diverse voices that an anarcho-capitalist is talking of a point which is indirectly in a different format, with a different terminology being applied by Narendra Modi here.
Hong Kong, without tariffs, did better than Taiwan or South Korea. I don't know enough about Taiwan or South Korea to be able to say how significant whatever protective tariffs they had were. My impression is that quite often, if you look at the countries as they developed, the thing the government was pushing was not the thing they were good at. That India was subsidizing its auto industry at a point when they could have bought secondhand autos very cheaply from the US and Europe. Instead, they were too poor to use secondhand autos, so they had to build very expensive new autos. So I just think that if you look at the developing world in general, that the pattern is usually that the intervention made things worse rather than better. On the other question, I think the moral argument for anarcho-capitalism for libertarians is very easy. The trouble is that if you follow out that moral argument consistently, you get conclusions nobody really believes in. That is, that the moral argument is that you shouldn't initiate coercion, basically. And my favorite sort of counter to that, Bill Bradford was the editor of Liberty magazine. He died, unfortunately. He was a wonderful person. But he, at some point, had a list of sort of problems for libertarians. And one of them is that you're on the balcony of your apartment on the 15th floor of an apartment building, and you somehow carelessly fall out. Fortunately, there's a flagpole on the 14th floor that you catch onto. and you're about to make your way hand over this fortunately very strong flagpole to get onto the terrace when the owner of that apartment comes out and says, I'm not giving you permission to use my flagpole on my terrace. Please let go. And I think Bill correctly believed that very few libertarians would let go. And yet that seems to be what their principles require. So similarly, it seems to me that there are real moral problems with taxation and conscription and a bunch of other things. But if you were persuaded that without those things, catastrophes would occur, if you really believed that if you didn't have taxation and conscription, you would be conquered by a brutal and oppressive government, you might decide you're willing to put up with that after all. That I would point out that Ludwig von Mises, who a lot of libertarians are fond of, wrote in at least one edition of Human Action that those who in these days oppose conscription are the enemies of freedom. Because under those circumstances, he could believe that. Now, he was also in favor of public subsidies to opera, but this may have to do with the fact that he was an Austrian.
Brilliant. Both these points are very important, actually. He was saying that at such point when he was writing that when Nice I can't actually pronounce his name. Anyone, if any libertarian opposes even mandatory military service, they are opposing freedom, because those soldiers will protect your freedom. Open society and its foundations. There has to be a society protected. A society is inside a guard wall. Society does not mean an open abstract thing. His second point is actually interesting for a different reason. He says that subsidies for choirs, orchestras might be because he was Austrian, and Austria, Vienna especially, is considered to be the capital of Western classical music. So he was not even letting go of his culture, which libertarians in India especially so often do. They imagine a reality in their heads where they think that they are living in a country or society which has nothing called culture. Culture is as a completely foreign concept for them. That is where libertarians lose out on a lot of, let's say, impactful work that they could have done. But since they are so hard and fast against the concept of culture, therefore I think they always end up proposing stupidity. And see, even this argument, what Ninar was saying here, now Maulana Modi is ANCAP Modi. Actually, no. Of course, Modi is doing that, again, because we have a once-in-a-lifetime candidate as the Prime Minister. Which other Prime Minister was going to do? How do you get that guarantee? Therefore, why not have a situation where the Prime Minister really does not have the power to do this in some imaginary, maybe possibly imaginary. I think it's doable. But also, remember that Modi, with his same power, could have done something else completely. And with his near 400 majority, how were you going to stop him? Okay, imagine Modi ends up tomorrow becoming an atheist and has the powers to do anything he wants and screws all Hindus. You don't have the power to stop Modi in any way. Tomorrow, Modi might want me dead so that he can use my death as a political weapon in Bengal. How will you stop it? There's no way to stop it. All we have is Modi's track record to trust that he will probably do the best thing for India. Modi ne kiya hai to kuch soch samajh ke kiya hua. That's the best thing you can hope for. But here, coincidentally, indirectly, he's doing a step which is being proposed by an anarcho-capitalist as well. But you see, he's saying that he is against tariffs because tariffs never happen for the right people. But he is saying that, therefore, don't even hope for tariffs for any company and should not be done by any government. But Modi is in fact making good use of his power and giving protection to the nascent industries. So all I'm saying is, imagine what's going to happen the day people like Modi Yogi go out of power and people like Mamata Banerjee. People like Mamata Banerjee can come to power even in BJP. Imagine intentions are all same, but their parties run by mafias. What are you going to do then?
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking David Friedman.
This was a very, very phenomenal live stream because we had such deep, intrusive, incisive discussions from the live chats. So I'll stay on for a few more minutes. Let's see if any important comments come up. Usually right when I go offline, someone asks some question and I feel sad. A is saying protest. Protest. By that moment, when you are going to protest against someone as powerful as Narendra Modi, who is legally that powerful, the moment you step out of your house to do the protest, you are done. It has support amongst Hindus as well, that intervention was invited by the community. Yes, we trust history and stats. Modi seems safe. Yeah, seems. Yeah, they trash culture thinking that they are that it's not liberal. They think that liberal values are the only accepted values. And where has liberalism talked of not believing in culture? Every society has its imagined realities, some culture, some rituals, some traditions, like WWE. Everyone who goes to watch WWE live, paying tickets, knows it's a completely fake, made-up story with people jumping around. Everyone goes there and celebrates it anyway. It's a social gathering, happiness sort of a moment for the entire American crowd. Can India become fascist after Modi? Absolutely. I think India will become fascist right after people like Modi go out of power. That's why I'm still hopeful that bit of libertarian mindedness gets into the people's mind before people like Modi and Yogi stop becoming PM, whereas that sort of power accumulation goes on in the hands of the Prime Minister. I'm talking about Indian libs. Indian libs have their own culture, you know. Kolkata coffee house, etc. What they consider culture, the problem with their idea of culture is that culture has to be separated from religion, or they will go into the realm of religion and call that the culture. that's the weird thing. Yeah, so I guess they are not opposed to culture, but their definition of culture is pretty toxic. Will Bengal ever come out of fascism? Not anytime soon. It's going to be fascism in favor or against someone or the other. Modi is being pretty freedom loving at the moment. Not at the extreme levels, but way more than any other prime minister in the history of India, I think. But it's not going to be the case the moment bad people come to power. First time Gujaratis would protest for a Bengali. Okay then, thank you for joining the live stream, guys. Thanks for the great conversations. Good night. Bye bye.